Normality. Luangpor Teean, 1911 to 1988, was one of the most remarkable teachers of Buddhist practice to appear in Asia in modern times. His teaching issued very directly from his own experience, intensely personal and original. Not a scholar nor academic, but a simple man who spoke very frankly about his experiences. His method of meditation employs simple hand and arm movements as a way to increase awareness. If you are searching for ways to calm a busy mind, Luangpor Teean's gentle teaching will guide the way. Luangpor Teean Jita Sub Ho. Forward. The way Luangpor Teean teaches differs somewhat from other teachings because he speaks directly from his experiences. Luangpor Teean couldn't read or write, nor speak Central Thai, only the Lao dialect, until 12 or 13 years before he died. Because of this lack of academic knowledge, his words don't always correspond to the accepted interpretations of those words. One who is attached to conservative explanations will find this unacceptable, but someone with an open mind, concerned about what is behind the words, can step over rigid views about what things mean. For example, the four chanas are explained in terms of the four stages of enlightenment, and seeing the Tathagata, as seeing oneself. Some of these points could be seen as ready-wit, Pali, Patipana, and at the same time, their meaning recognized. Other things need a mature attitude of not fussing about definitions, but sincerely opening up to what Luangpor is trying to convey. It is unlikely that it will escape the reader's attention that Luangpor Teean was a simple man, who spoke very frankly about his experiences, and the reason he did so seems rather obvious. With confidence one is liable to open up the mind more and come closer to what Luangpor is pointing to. To have an open mind is exactly what awareness is about, to receive anything that appears or occurs in the present, whether it is a sensation due to movements, breathing, the eyes blinking, the knee resting on the floor, a breeze touching the skin, or even sound and visual phenomena. We hear and see them in the present, don't we? As long as the mind doesn't proliferate, all of this can be used as more objects of awareness. They are not obstacles. That's a different attitude than training in concentration, where the mind is narrowed down to one point. But samadhi is the establishing of the mind, and we can establish the mind in awareness every second of the day because movements, as well as this practice, are natural. The translator. Walking the path. Taking a shortcut. Today the monks, novices, and lay people are meeting here in order to study the method to develop meditation. We're not interested in anything else because we've done it already. For example, making merit, being generous, upholding precepts, and doing tranquility, meditation. As for insight meditation, we've heard about it, but we don't yet understand, or we've only practiced it a little bit. Therefore, before we start practicing insight meditation, we have to rely on listening and reading from scriptures before we understand what tranquility meditation is and what insight meditation is. Developing awareness is the path that the Buddha teaches. Things outside of Buddhism. Making merit, being generous, keeping precepts, and doing tranquility meditation are a pair with the world. Whether there is a Buddha or there is no Buddha, these things exist anyway. When Prince Siddhartha was born, Brahmins were assiduously looked after, which is making merit and offerings. As for tranquility meditation, it's a matter of psychic powers, a matter of ambition. We've probably heard about becoming invisible, flying through the air, diving into the earth, reading other people's minds, multiplying oneself, reciting magical verses to obstruct vision, and hearing by entering absorption. This is not insight. According to the Buddha's biography, when Prince Siddhartha ordained, he studied with the hermit Alara, and mastered 7 absorptions, 4 form absorptions and 3 formless absorptions. But suffering still existed. That is to say, there was still greed, hatred, and delusion. He was not satisfied with this and so studied with the last teacher, the hermit Utthaga, until he mastered the 8 absorptions, 4 form absorptions and 4 formless absorptions. The hermit said, "That's as much as I know." But the prince was still not satisfied because there was still greed, hatred, and delusion. He wasn't liberated from suffering yet. This shows that tranquility is not able to put an end to suffering. After this, the prince tormented himself, together with the 5 ascetics who were following him. He fasted until his body was so thin that it was just skin over his bones, and he held his breath. But even after doing all this, greed, hatred, delusion, satisfaction and dissatisfaction still persisted. There were still defilements. Things inside Buddhism. So the prince gave up those methods and started to eat fruit. Because of this, the 5 disciples avoided and eventually left him, so he practiced by himself. Having eaten some rice offered by Miss Suchata, his body recovered strength. He reflected on the various methods that he had been practicing but which were not capable of shaking off the defilements. He still had troubles and suffering. So the prince turned around and looked at his mind and was, at last, successful. He attained Anuttara Sammasambodhiyana and became the fully enlightened Buddha. He was able to conquer all the defilements and to extinguish suffering, leaving only coolness. His body was back to normal and his mind was free of suffering at last. He lived with and enjoyed the happiness of awareness and wisdom. Having attained this, the Buddha shrank back from teaching, reflecting that this practice was profound, and it would be hard to understand. So it can be taken that mind development is something difficult to do, and that this is what Buddhist teaching is about. As for making merit, being generous, keeping precepts, and doing tranquility meditation, it is not the teaching of the Buddha, but a teaching of teachers at large. Teachings outside of Buddhism. There were many sects in India. Some sects taught to lie roasting on fire so that defilements would dry up, some taught to lie on thorns to endure through the pain and torment that resulted from that, in order to get rid of defilements. Some sects ought to give up everything including clothes, a practice known as naked asceticism, so as to induce the feeling that there is no self, no shame. It was believed that defilements would be dissolved that way. Altogether, there were many sects, but none of them could eliminate the defilements. This matter can easily be proven, as it is said that lying roasting on fire and drinking hot water will result in the heat burning off the defilements. In the old days, in the villages, when a woman gave birth, she would be laid down roasting above a fire and given hot water to drink. But the woman would still have defilements, showing that this sect did not achieve results. As for the sect that would have its followers give up everything and go naked, just look at a baby not wearing clothes. It still has moods and feelings. As soon as someone talks nicely, it laughs. And when someone scolds, it cries, whether naked or clothed. This shows that defilements are not in the body, they are in the mind. Therefore, to practice Dhamma we have to practice at the mind. I will tell you so you'll understand, because I have been doing this, repeating a mantra such as Bhud, though, Samat Arahant, rising falling, counting, 1, 2, 3 with these methods, one has to sit with the eyes closed and repeat a word while watching the breath, for example, saying Bhud, with the in-breath, and though, with the out-breath. I've done quite a lot of this, but there was still satisfaction and dissatisfaction, greed, hatred, and delusion didn't diminish. This kind of practice is called tranquility meditation. Tranquility meditation is not more than a means to make the mind peaceful, but it is peace under the influence of delusion. It's just like putting a rock on top of grass. As long as the rock is on top of the grass can't grow, but when the rock is removed, the grass grows just as before, or maybe even more vigorously than before. It is true that there is no lopa, dosa, and moha when we're sitting alone, with the eyes closed, but as soon as we go back into society, like and dislike are born again. This is how it is. Going off to stay in a cave in a forest or the mountains cannot extinguish suffering, just because of going to stay there. At first, I did it like that also. The teachings inside Buddhism. The word Vipassana translates as realizing and truly seeing. Seeing what? Seeing impermanence, instability, and non-selfhood. When having insight, one views things differently than before. It is a transcendency. When we don't yet see clearly nor truly know, then acting, speaking, and thinking are as before. It is not yet Vipassana. But when we feel differently than before, that is, greed, hatred and delusion decrease, it can be called Vipassana. A handful of leaves, awareness. To practice insight meditation, the Buddha teaches us to develop 4 foundations of awareness, namely 1. Gayanupassana Satipatthana, that is, to meditate on the body, in the body, and see according to actuality, that this body is only just a body, it's not a being, an individual, nor a self. It is neither me nor it. 2. Vedananupassana Satipatthana, to meditate on the feelings, and see according to actuality, that these feelings are only just feelings, they are not a being, an individual, nor a self. They are neither me nor them. 3. Jittanupassana Satipatthana, to meditate on the mind, in the mind, and see according to actuality, that this mind is only just mind, it is not a being, an individual, nor a self. It is neither me nor it. 4. Dhammanupassana Satipatthana, to meditate on the mental objects, in the mental objects, and see according to actuality, that these mental objects are only just mental objects. They are not a being, an individual, nor a self. They are neither me nor them. The teachings of the Buddha are many, I'm not able to describe all of it. We probably heard that at one time our Buddha was walking with a number of monks in the forest. Seeing fallen leaves scattered around, the Buddha picked up a handful of leaves and asked those bhikkhus, monks, which is more, the leaves in my hand or all the leaves in the forest? The bhikkhus answered, the leaves in the forest are more than those in your hand, so much so that they cannot be compared. The Buddha then taught that the knowledge and understanding that the Buddha had studied was comparable to the leaves in the forest, and the knowledge that he taught us was comparable to a handful of leaves. The leaves in the forest stand for making merit, generosity, keeping precepts, and developing tranquility meditation, and the handful of leaves for insight meditation. However, to do Vipassana we have to study through listening and reading at first, before we start practicing. Otherwise we'll waste a lot of time gathering all the leaves in the forest. The practice of Vipassana that the Buddha teaches, though developing the 4 Satipatthana, means learning to be aware. The Buddha said that there are 2 things that are of great assistance, namely, first, sati, to recollect or not forget that there is the body, that there are movements, that there are feelings, that there is mind or that there are mental objects. Before doing or thinking anything, know it with awareness. And second, sampajanya, to realize, the moment we're thinking something, to realize it fully. Sati sampajanya, when using ordinary language, just means to wake up, to awaken, to feel oneself all the time. Developing awareness gives rise to wisdom. Talking from experience, it is not necessary to sit with the eyes closed in order to develop awareness. I've done the method of sitting with closed eyes, and wisdom didn't arise. But doing the new method, my method, wisdom did arise, and I got the feeling that is in accordance with the texts. Some people may think that my method is new because they've never heard it before, but actually it is as old as the Buddhist teachings. A. Arouse the body to always feel and be awake. The development of awareness that I'm talking about and have been doing is done as follows. We can either sit down on the floor or on a chair, and it can even be done in the lying or standing position. Catch with your awareness the movements of the hands, Turn the hand up, turn the hand down, raise the hand, lower the hand. Be aware of each posture. Do this often. This is the coarse way of developing awareness. Simply speaking, walking, or lying down, or whatever you may be doing, know it. Everyone can do this method, no matter what religion one believed in. It can be practiced by all. People of all nationalities can do it because everyone has a body and mind. All religions teach the same thing, to abandon what is bad and to do what is good. B. Arouse the mind to always feel and be awake. Having developed awareness until one is skilled at it, catch the feelings in the mind with awareness, following whatever comes up, no matter what one is thinking. Know and see it. Keep watching your own thoughts continuously. Regardless of what you're doing, look at your own mind all the time, no matter what it is that you are doing, reading a book, writing, digging, cutting grass or bathing. Keep watch over your own mind all the time. What kinds of feelings are coming up? Satisfaction, dissatisfaction, worry, doubts, etc. These things are all thoughts, objects. Watch over these thoughts and objects. Then we will see the various kinds of thoughts, such as gladness, sadness, desire to get, desire to not get, anger, hate, and so forth. They don't exist all the time. They arise and pass away, they change all the time. We are not glad or sad for 24 hours. See, to know and see according to reality. Change, arising passing away, is what the Buddha showed to be impermanence, instability and non-selfhood. So don't follow moods. The Buddha proclaimed that he was enlightened by working with the mind. We have to look at our minds. Watching the mind is turning on the light by using the switch. When we do this often, awareness will become nimble and quick, awareness will intercept greed, hatred, and delusion and prevent it from arising. Awareness and concentration are together. As for wisdom, it means knowing and seeing clearly. In Pali, it says Nati Panyasama, meaning there is nothing as bright as wisdom. And Sathi they sung Navaranung, meaning awareness is that which prevents the stream of defilements. There isn't anything that is fast enough to hold back the stream, other than Sathi. It is this awareness and wisdom, that come and contact, know, see, and stop it, not letting us become deluded. This is because Sathi, Samadhi, Panya, is opposite to dosa, moha, lopa. If we don't see, know, and understand, there is full greed, hatred, and delusion. It is comparable to nighttime, when it's dark. As soon as we light a candle there is light and the darkness disappears, because darkness is afraid of light. As soon as the candle goes out, the darkness immediately comes back. D. Peace as result. That I'm giving some reflections and explaining, this shortcut method of practice is in order for you all to take it, and practice with it, so that you get quick results and don't have to waste time. This method can be used in daily life, there is no need to stop working in order to practice. Some people have practiced a bit already, and some people have only just heard it. Some people who have never heard it might feel displeased. If that's how you feel, then discard that feeling first, the knowledge that you have learned before. Put it down for now and test out what I'm saying, try it out and you will know what the results that arise are like. I dare to guarantee that, this method is at least 80% right according to what the Buddha teaches. Talking according to just my own personal feeling, it is 100% right, because having practiced it, I know that it alleviates greed, hatred, and delusion. When those things diminish, peace arises instead. E. Full awareness as result. I'd like to give another example. Take a glass. We can see that there is air in the glass. When we pour water into it, the air goes out and the water is in it instead. Then, when we pour the water out, the air goes back in and replaces the water. This compares with our turning up the hand. We know, we have awareness, Sathi comes to replace not knowing, delusion. Not knowing goes out of our minds. Do it often. Catch the feeling often, in all postures. Sati will increase, and delusion, not knowing, will decrease just as the water replaces air in the glass. Maybe some of you have heard about, or have been taught, to make merit, for example by building a ceremonial hall or temple, and you get merit for this or that many eons. And you've probably heard that, 100 years on earth equals on year in heaven. The angels throw one sesame seed in a pit that is 100 leagues deep. When it is full, that's 1 eon. Other than that, you've probably heard that to once put food into a monk's bowl, you get rewarded for 6 eons, sending a container with food to offer to monks, one gets rewarded for 5 eons, to send food for the midday meal, 5 eons. These things are puzzles, but some people don't understand. If you want to understand, you have to practice, to develop awareness, by turning the hand up and down, feeling it. Before, we would do things without sati, not feeling anything at all. It's comparable to an abyss or pit that is empty, nothing in it, just like in that puzzle. But when training in awareness, catching the movement in all postures, for example, blinking the eyes, sitting and lying down, we are aware, feeling it, knowing it. When doing this, sati increases, just like the sesame seeds that fall in the pit, or abyss that is 100 leagues wide, and 100 leagues deep. The aim of this comparison is that we train a lot in awareness, and that we do it a lot in order to get results, to make sati full, so that we are not negligent or deluded. When we have developed the 4 foundations of awareness, as described earlier, we will have the ability to really contemplate, ponder, and understand the various problems in our minds. Developing awareness in the right way will yield results within 3 years. It says in the scriptures that whoever develops the 4 satipatthana in the right way, and as continuous as links in a chain, will receive one of the following 2 results, at most, within 7 years, medium within months, or as fast as 1 to 15 days to become, 1, an arahant, or 2, an anagama, i.e., one who is nearly fully enlightened, in this very life. As for the way of developing the awareness that I'm talking about, if you really do it, knowledge and understanding will arise, and suffering will diminish, within at most 3 years, medium within 1 year, or as fast as 1 to 90 days. We will know, see, and understand, and our life from then onwards will have happiness and no suffering. To practice like this, we don't have to spend money, we can do it an hour a day, or 5 minutes. Even hearing about it often makes the defilements gradually diminish. Greed, hatred, and delusion are evil, they are suffering. To get angry once is evil and is suffering one time. Evil and darkness are the same. Darkness means not seeing, not knowing, not understanding. Merit and knowledge are the same. When we understand, we are at ease, we don't have suffering and we don't doubt. If the mind is dark, there is suffering and doubt. For example, doubt that we're going to be reborn like this and like that after death. But some people, including myself, who have made merit, been generous, kept precepts and practiced tranquility meditation, still doubt about merit and demerit, about falling into hell or going up to heaven after death. They don't understand at that time. The Buddha teaches that heaven is in the heart, hell is in the mind, and Nibbana also is in the mind. Our grandparents used to tell us this, but we didn't reflect on it, so we didn't understand it. We have to practice and know for ourselves. Studying from scriptures is good, but it cannot solve suffering. Teachers teach that we should let go of greed, hatred, and delusion, but they themselves can't let go of it. Teaching others is easy, but teaching oneself is hard. But this method of mine is not difficult. You don't have to study or learn anything. Being able to read and write or not is of no importance. Everyone can practice, men as well as women, ordained or not ordained. We can all practice. There is only one Dhamma, not many kinds. To say that the Dhamma of a person who keeps 5 precepts is one thing, that the Dhamma of a person who keeps 8 precepts is another thing, The Dhamma of an ordained person is another thing, the Dhamma of a lay person is another thing, the Dhamma of a person who practices insight meditation yet another thing. That is a different matter. That is not what I'm talking about. I say that there is only one Dhamma. Dhamma is to finish lopa, dosa, and moha. Doing this is what virtue and Dhamma are. It says in the scriptures that virtue is the means to eliminate coarse defilements, concentration is the means to eliminate medium defilements, and wisdom is the means to eliminate subtle defilements. But can we really eliminate them? No. Why not? Because we don't do it properly. The word defilement stands for greed, hatred, and delusion, but most of us understand it only as materialistic, that having money, a big house and a smart car is defilement. But in reality, those things are not defilements. They are just things that come from being diligent and knowing how to work, and from knowing how to save and accumulate things. But the defilements that I'm talking about are greed, hatred, delusion, and sorrow. These defilements are not afraid of anyone, not of rich people, not of influential people, not even of monks ordained for a long time, with a title, are they afraid? They enter into everyone's mind. On speaking in another way, we could say that the defilements slap everyone's face. A wealthy person, on being told off a bit, is displeased. This shows that the defilements slap him or her in the face. Or when someone praises him or her, satisfaction arises. This is the defilements slapping his or her face. These defilements are not afraid of anyone at all. They are only afraid of those who are disciples of the Buddha, they are afraid of those who develop the four foundations of awareness in the right way, they are ashamed, they don't dare to come close, because that person has the eye to see the Dhamma, the wisdom to see clearly. Of the lay people who have come here today, some people are still young, only 20 to 30 years old. If you develop awareness in the right way, within 2 or 3 years you will go beyond suffering, and during the remaining part of your life, you will just have happiness. Even older people 50 or 60 years old, are the same. Until you die your life will only have happiness. And when you die without suffering. If you still have another 9 or 10 years to live, it will be 9 or 10 years without suffering, with only happiness and coolness of mind. This is the heartwood, the essence of Buddhism. The word Buddha means the one who knows, the awakened one who is joyful with Dhamma. I have shared some of my reflections and understanding. It is a shortcut to practicing Vipassana. It is instantaneous. Having listened, please practice with every breath, no matter where you are, whatever work you are engaged in. You can practice while washing clothes, doing the dishes, sweeping up, or working in the field. Vipassana is wisdom, it is life, it is virtue, it is the Dhamma, it is everything. It is the real life, it is the real Dhamma. May you understand it like this. Summary of the shortcut. I'll give you a few small reflections. 1. To be diligent in developing awareness in all postures, turn the hand up, turn the hand down, raise the hand, lower the hand, walk back and forth, lean to the right and the left, blink the eyes, open the mouth, swallow saliva, breath in and out, fully feeling yourself doing it. This is called having sati. It is equal to throwing sesame seeds into the abyss. When awareness is complete, wisdom arises to really know and see the following matters: rupa, nama, rupa doing, nama doing, rupa disease, nama disease, knowing instability, impermanence and non-selfhood, knowing convention, knowing religion, knowing Buddhism, knowing evil, knowing merit. Really knowing. These are objects to know with real awareness and wisdom. 2. Next, to work with the mind, look at the mind with awareness. Whatever the mind thinks, immediately know it and conquer it. When we immediately know and conquer thought, this is called working with the mind. 3. Do it until you are nimble and swift, until greed, hatred and delusion stop arising. It is the calming and extinguishing of suffering in the mind. This type of suffering we can't chase away as we would chase off a pig, a dog, a duck, or a chicken. We must depend on the development of awareness, and see our minds in order to deal with these types of defilements. If we don't see our minds, we will be empty, similar to a pit or abyss that is never full. When we have awareness, it means it is full, it is no longer a pit or an abyss, and lopa, dosa, and moha don't have a place to enter, because awareness is full. Whatever work we do it with sathipanya. There is no delusion, only rightness. These types of defilements are ugly and worthy of getting fed up with. Whoever is a disciple of the Buddha with an eye to see the Dhamma, will not have them lying around in his or her mind. They are afraid. Suppose we have defilements at a level of 100%. They slap our face 100%. When we see and understand them, they will gradually diminish. Then, when we try to become familiar with looking at our minds, the defilements will diminish increasingly, step by step. When it reaches 100%, we're rid of suffering. What is left is 100% happiness. Therefore, may you all try to practice and reach the real peace and happiness. The path of peace. May you all listen well, this time, so that sathipanya springs up. Knowing suffering. Something we have in common is that we don't want suffering, we hate it. Then how does suffering arise? Suffering arises because we don't know. Suffering doesn't exist within us, and it doesn't arise all the time. What really exists for sure is normality. By nature, the mind of each person is in a state of normality. As we're working, if we do it with delusion, it is called suffering. Most people have suffering while working because they don't see suffering. People who go and see movies and shows do so because suffering leads them. This is due to our not watching minds. The moment we want to go and watch a movie, a thought flashes up that we want to watch a movie. We're not thinking it all day long. When the thought comes up, we don't see the thought. We only just know the thought, and we act, following the thought. This is called suffering. People who smoke are the same. Sometimes they don't even think to smoke but simply follow their moods. They take a cigarette to smoke because they think it is happiness, but actually it is suffering that compels them to do it. Suffering stinks. As to this word suffering, the Buddha sometimes calls it suffering, sometimes defilement, sometimes stench. When talking about suffering or defilements, one notes that it has an ugly smell to it, according to Buddhism. Suffering is something dirty and it stinks, nobody wants it. As soon as the body dies, it starts to rot and stink. But we can still wash and clean it. Excrement is something that stinks, and we detest it. Nobody wants to touch or grab hold of it. But even with such stinking things, the Buddha said, they don't stink all that much, they can still be touched and washed. But the stinking things to which the Buddha is referring are really stinky. They are greed, hatred, and delusion, concealed in our minds, ready to bubble up. The Buddha condemns this emphatically. If anyone's mind still has greed, hatred, and delusion, the Buddha says that it stinks more than excrement. As soon as the mind thinks something in a flash, a person who doesn't know, doesn't see, and doesn't understand becomes deluded immediately. This arising is called by the Buddha, a stain. The word stain means delusion. Even though we've never known, seen, or watched our minds, we still say that we see. But in reality it is not seeing, it is only just knowing thought, and then we act according to the thought. When we say to see, it should mean that we see defilements. That is, we see that either there is greed, hatred, or delusion mixed up in thought, or there is not. To see like this, we have to practice Dhamma first. Practicing Dhamma. Vipassana. In practicing Dhamma, even though one may practice various methods for a long time, if one doesn't perceive that point where the mind is manifesting, one still doesn't understand. One still doesn't understand the main principle of practice according to the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha said that he was enlightened because he worked with the mind, practiced with the mind. but most of us just make merit and give offerings in order to chase off suffering. We haven't yet practiced by following the Buddha style. The Buddha once taught that the results of making merit 100 or 1,000 times are less than is gained by keeping the precepts even once. The results of keeping precepts 100 or 1,000 times are less than making the mind peaceful through practicing tranquility meditation once, and the results of making the mind peaceful through practicing tranquility meditation 100 or 1,000 times are less than practicing insight meditation once. What does insight mean? Insight means to clearly and truly see in a way that is different from one's original way of seeing. Different because the original way of seeing is a state that doesn't know, see, and understand clearly. Briefly stated, the mind is muddled up. Doing Vipassana means to be aware. Being aware is very fruitful. The Buddha practiced Dhamma through being aware, and so became enlightened. Peace. Most of us understand that in order to be an arahant, we have to do tranquility meditation and make the mind peaceful. In reality, there are two kinds of peace, namely, peace that is like being inside a cave, and peace that is like being outside a cave. Peace inside a cave means it is just as though we're in a cave or we're in a dark room. When we light a fire, the darkness disappears and light come to take its place, but as soon as the fire goes out, the darkness come back again. Even when we've made a fire and there's light, we're still in the cave and we still can't see the shape of the cave. We only just see certain things inside the cave. Peace inside a cave is therefore called peace under the influence of moha, a not knowing kind of peace, or even a not wanting to know kind of peace. That some people go and sit to make their minds peaceful, understanding that they're developing insight, this is so, but it's a diluted kind of truth. As for peace outside a cave, it's just like being outside a cave, but it's not dark. There's no need to make a fire, and we're able to know and see what the shape of the cave is like. This may be likened to peace that is without delusion, i.e., peace due to the absence of defilements. There is no lopa, dosa, or moha. In order to achieve this kind of peace, we have to realize and truly see first. Seeing truly and clearly is called insight. Insight is to realize and truly see according to reality. Peace outside the cave is therefore called a knowing kind of peace. One is peaceful because one knows. I want to shake up and warn all of you that developing insight has many obstacles. If we don't know, we'll go wrong, but when we see, know, and understand, we can solve the problems. The first obstacle. The first obstacle in developing Vipassana can appear when we make movements with the body, and sati is aware of it. Wisdom arises in the mind that knows reality as it really is. That is, it knows rupa, nama, it knows instability, impermanence and non-selfhood, it knows convention, it knows religion, knows Buddhism, knows evil and knows merit. This is wisdom knowing through Vipassana. But it's only just the outer bark of Vipassana, still not able to deal with suffering. It is just knowing in knowing, it is knowing through thought, knowing the scriptures. It is defilement due to Vipassana. The obstacle is that when this kind of knowledge arises, we get buried in it, a kind of knowledge that is still similar to being inside a cave. Therefore, next we must try and find a method to get out of the cave, to pull ourselves out of that knowledge, gradually, by watching our thoughts. As soon as a thought flashes up, know, see, and understand that it has come up. This is practicing Dhamma a little bit deeper. Ordinarily, a tree has an outer bark. When one removes the outer bark, he reaches the layer with the nourishing sap inside. Removing that layer, one reaches the white wood. Removing that, one comes to the hardwood. Buddhism is the same. Knowing rupanama, evil and merit is also knowledge, but it is outer knowledge, enough to deal with suffering on one level, such as not being foolish by believing in auspicious things and lucky omens, or in ghosts and angels. But when one is in such a state, greed, hatred, and delusion are still there, because one doesn't know the origin or source of it. To solve this problem, to know the origin of the arising of greed, hatred, and delusion, We must watch our minds, like a cat that waits for a chance to grab a mouse. As soon as a thought comes up in the mind, look at it and fix on it so that it is known in time. A thought comes. Whack, cut it off straight away. Another one, whack, cut it off right there. Do this often. Thoughts will thereby decrease and awareness will increase. Just as with the positive and the negative. When there is more of the positive, the negative lessens. We start off never having seen thought, thinking 100 things and never seeing a single thought. But when we are watching like this, we catch it once and cut it off. The remaining thoughts are less than 100 now and will steadily decrease step by step, as long as we keep at it. We keep gazing like this, a thought comes, we cut it off, another one arises, we drop it. When we think 100 thoughts and we know 95 of them, it shows that we have a lot of awareness. Just 5 thoughts left that we can't keep up with. Right here is where we have to put forth effort, watch thought but don't be caught up in the thought. When we know and see all the 100 thoughts, keep up with every thought every time, it is equal to knowing and seeing exactly where greed, hatred, and delusion are born. We have to throw them off so that defilements are unable to arise. This is called to keep abreast by knowing, to know in time. Knowing how to prevent, knowing how to solve. This is where we're able to deal with lopa, dosa, and moha. Defilements can arise because we get deluded right here. We don't know that their origin is right here. This refers even to someone who goes to the monastery to listen to talks, who makes offerings, who keeps precepts and develops both tranquility and insight meditation. If that person has still never seen his or her own thoughts, then that person is still far from the truth taught by the Buddha. Contrariwise, even if a person has never gone to a monastery to listen to the Dhamma, has never made offerings or kept precepts, but is always aware of what his or her mind is thinking, that person equals with knowing. He keeps abreast of thoughts, knows how to prevent, knows how to solve and knows how to conquer every time. That person is close to the truth, the Dhamma taught by the Buddha. Have you ever heard of the Buddha having taught that the Dhamma exists already? But there is nobody with discernment who can dig it up and find it, so it stays undiscovered. Because it is undiscovered, people make merit, give offerings, keep precepts, and do samatha meditation in order to develop good habits. So we believe that it is meritorious and wholesome to accumulate those things for the next life or for the future. This is wrong understanding. The Buddha didn't teach like this. The Buddha taught us to see our own minds. We have heard the story of the monk Wakali, who was attached to the Buddha's body and never looked at his own mind. When he was corrected by the Buddha, he became so upset that he was going to jump from a cliff and die. The Buddha stopped him and taught him that it is difficult to get born as a human being. And it's very rare for a human being to have an opportunity to listen to the Dhamma from a noble person. The Buddha said further that his body was just material. After his death it would rot and stink. That is not the Buddha. The real Buddha can be found within the monk Wakali. It is the Dhamma that is present in all people, that is, cleanliness, brightness and peace, which is the Buddha. The Buddha proclaimed, "Whoever sees the Dhamma, sees me. Whoever doesn't see the Dhamma, doesn't see me, even when taking hold of my robe or my finger." The monk Wakali woke up and started to work with the mind, and he saw his own thinking. Seeing the Dhamma. I would like to remind you once more that the word Dhamma refers to our seeing, our own minds at the moment that we are acting, talking or thinking. This is what is called seeing the Dhamma. I dare to insist that the very life of the Dhamma exists in all people without exception, no matter whether you are a man or a woman, a monk or a novice, no matter what nationality you may have, whatever language you may speak of, whatever clothes you may wear. It's all the same. The Dhamma is the actions of body, speech, and mind. Actions of the body other people can see, actions of speech others can hear, but actions of the mind others are not able to see. You can only see them yourself. For this reason, the monk Wakali felt at ease viewing it like this. Whether he saw the body of the Buddha or not, he would feel at ease because he saw the real Buddha, that is, really seeing according to reality, an ability that exists in everyone. The Buddha once described seeing in this way, with flowers, black, red, white, or whatever color, they are all ready to bloom when touched by sunshine. That I'm giving you these reflections right now is the same. Anyone can apply them in daily life, whether man or woman, whatever clothes he or she may be wearing, whatever religion is upheld. It can be used by everyone in the same way, because we all have a body and mind. When one sees one's own mind at the moment that it thinks, this indicates that one sees one's own mind at the origin or source of thought. The Buddha points to thought, which must be watched with awareness, as one must not get caught up in the thoughts. Whoever sees this, he or she is called by the Buddha a flower that is ready to bloom when the sun shines. The word sunshine refers to the teachings of the Buddha that direct us to practice with the mind. Whatever work you do, control your thoughts with awareness. Some people don't do it yet, because they're not interested. But when we are interested, when we are suffering, we must be ready to do it. There are 84,000 teachings in Buddhism. They are not for reciting and for performing ceremonies. That was not the Buddha's intention. The Buddha's teachings have nothing at all to do with superstition. They are to be practiced only in order to solve the suffering of the mind. Some people might agree that without ceremonies and rituals Buddhism can't extinguish suffering. This fails to understand the meaning in the right way. We've heard that in the time of the Buddha, when he would expound the Dhamma to people, there were many people, who would open the eye to see the Dhamma and enter the stream of Nibbana, from the first stage of enlightenment upwards by the time the discourse was finished. They didn't have to perform rites and rituals other than working with the mind, as the Buddha indicated. Wherever we explain the Dhamma, if we don't make this point, our words are a stain. Why are they a stain? They are a stain because we don't indicate the way that people who are interested in the Dhamma must practice, in order to free oneself from suffering and defilements. And they are a stain because we thereby abandon these effective teachings. Therefore, may you all try to understand this point without fail. If we don't practice according to this important teaching, then we fail to understand the teaching of the Buddha. The second obstacle. The second obstacle in developing insight is that when we begin to understand and see this point, we are able to destroy greed, hatred, and delusion to some extent, but at the same time, joy is lying concealed within it. The Buddha says this is still not right. Joy is darkness, but it is white darkness. Joy is due to our satisfaction and pride that we can do it. White darkness is frightening because it is hard to see. Black darkness is easy to see because it is dark. Being caught up in joy is to see wrong as right, because as soon as we can destroy some defilements, we don't watch at the point where the defilements are destroyed, but we get sucked into the point where joy arises. Therefore joy is an obstacle in attaining higher stages to Nibbana. Being caught up in joy is equal to being caught up in thinking. A thought comes up and we get caught up in the thought, so we don't see the thought. When we get caught up in joy, we don't see joy, and we're just content with joy. Because of this, the Buddha teaches us to pull ourselves out of the thought that we're thinking, to stand outside of it. Then we will see our thoughts. People who still don't know and see their thoughts say just the same, that they know thought. But in reality they don't understand that thoughts come up continuously, and they get caught up in them. Those who have joy or are attached to the peace of tranquility meditation are the same. They are caught up in peacefulness, don't know that peace is delusion, and thus get caught up in peace. It is comparable to someone who doesn't know how to turn on the light. He or she turns the light bulb. No light appears. The person who pulls him or herself out of thought, and knows and sees thoughts, may be compared to someone who knows how to turn on the light. That person turns on the switch and light does appear. So we have to know the origin of thought and come to an understanding with these little thoughts of ours. Then we will have as much ability as an electric light in brightening the interior of the mind, just as one correctly turns on the light with the switch. When we're looking at our minds, there is no greed, hatred, and delusion. But the moment that we're not looking and lose awareness, greed, hatred, and delusion can come back, and we can get caught up in them. It's just like a car driving along the road. At the place where the car passes there is a wind blowing behind it, leaves and dust flap and flutter at the back of the car. Thoughts of greed, hatred, and delusion flash up for a moment, and we follow them. How can we still say that we know thought? In reality we don't see thought, but we get caught up in it. The Buddha teaches that whoever doesn't see one's own thoughts is a heedless person. Heedlessness is poison to one's life, it's like being dead. This is what I said, it stinks. The Buddha said that there is nothing that stinks as much as the mind that has greed, hatred, and delusion, the mind that is stained, the dirty mind. Our real mind isn't dirty or stained at all. It's like a light bulb. The filament in the bulb is not dirty, but dust can settle on the outside of the bulb, the inside is still as bright as before. Or we could compare it with the sun. When clouds obscure the light from coming to the earth, it gets dark, but the sun is still as bright as before. Vidchat, avidchat. People who don't see thought and get caught up in thought are called people in the cycle of dependent origination, they are people who don't know. We've probably heard this, avidchat is the condition for formation to arise, formations are the condition for the birth of consciousness, consciousness conditions mentality materiality, mentality materiality conditions the six senses, the six senses condition contact, contact conditions feeling, feeling conditions craving, craving conditions clinging, clinging conditions being, being conditions birth, and birth conditions old age, death, and suffering. It's a cycle. Avidchat translates as not knowing, we say that we know, but we don't see our minds. Instead we get caught up in thought. As for the word vidchat, it means knowing, seeing one's own thoughts. A thought comes up, we see it, and it stops. It's like a cat and a mouse. If we don't have a cat at home, the mice are not afraid, but when we have a cat, it will catch the mice as soon as they show their faces. The mice die of shock when they get caught. They can die even though the cat doesn't bite. They have such shock, never been caught by a cat before. This is similar to our fixing on thoughts in our minds. When a thought comes, we know it in time, and it immediately stops, comes to a halt, can't concoct any further. This is called vidchat, knowing, to know in time, knowing how to prevent, knowing how to solve and knowing how to conquer, just like a cat and a mouse. If we don't reflect on the teachings of the Buddha, we don't understand them, and we argue and debate about the teachings, competing with each other. This is not right. Someone who has studied the teaching, and employs that knowledge as a tool for killing defilement, or dealing with suffering is doing it right, according to the Buddha's intention. These days, we study the Buddhist scriptures until we have degrees, up to the 9th level. Some may look at their own thoughts, but some never watch their minds at all. Whoever has studied but never seen his or her own thoughts, says the Buddha, are like a termite that makes holes and eats books. With academic studies it's the same, studying until one has university degrees, but still never watching one's mind. Such persons know about other people but don't know and see themselves. These people are not considered wise in Buddhism because their knowledge is only of use in an academic way, but is not useful spiritually. When we have a university degree we should deal with our minds also, that is, eliminate defilements, the coarse ones as well as the medium and subtle ones. Going against the stream of thought. We've all probably heard that the Buddha at one time practiced by tormenting himself, but saw that that method was wrong and stopped it. After that, he partook of food offered by a lady named Suchata. The Buddha asked her, "Do you offer just the food or is the tray included as well?" She answered that all was offered. Having finished the meal, the Buddha took the tray to the bank of the river and made the following resolution: if he would be enlightened, may the tray placed on the water flow against the current. This is not a true story, it's an illustration and has meaning on the level of the mind. The tray is the mind, the water represents the defilements, and the Buddha working with the mind is the action of going against the stream. The Buddha didn't let his mind follow the defilements. The current of the water is the current of thought. Following defilements is easy, everyone is doing it already, and so we have suffering. The Buddha practiced going against the stream of defilements for the extinguishing of suffering by watching the mind, seeing his own mind thinking. As soon as a thought would come up and there was desire to follow what the eye saw, the ear heard, the nose smelled, the tongue tasted, or the body felt, the Buddha saw those thoughts as defilements. He practiced going against the current of thought, not following the thoughts, which want things. Practicing like this, knowledge arose in him and he was enlightened. The thing that the Buddha points out to us to practice is to know thought with awareness, looking at our own minds. Whatever thought comes up, we should know and understand it, so that the thought does not proliferate further. When thought flashes up, we watch it with awareness, and the thought stops by itself. In practicing Dhamma, the thing to be careful about is the knowledge that knows things outside of ourselves. This kind of knowledge is defilement due to Vipassana. When we have such knowledge, it gives rise to gladness and joy. Joy is called white darkness. It is wrong knowing. Don't get attached to joy. Continuing the practice to the end, until we clearly see our thoughts, their origin, and their source, we come at last to the state of arising, passing. It is a break-off, a final exhaustion. I've compared it many times with a rope, tightly tied on both sides and being cut in the middle with a knife. The rope breaks, one cannot pull it together again, that is, one can't use it anymore. The 12 senses are similar, on seeing a form with the eye, on hearing a sound with the ear, etc., let there only just be seeing and hearing and so on. Don't concoct it into beautiful or ugly, good or bad, pleasing or displeasing sound, the sound of a woman, the sound of a man, etc. Just simply see or hear neutrally. But these are still mere words. In practice, we have to look and see and break them apart. When they are broken, there is not more concocting, the senses are not able to reach each other anymore. Cleanliness, brightness, and peace. Our minds are already clean, bright and peaceful. Clean means not dirty, because there are no defilements. Bright means there is wisdom, seeing our minds, or life. Peaceful means having stopped, there is no longer anything further to add. Summary. At this point, I'll summarize the principles of practice. First, the first stage is to catch the movements of the body in all the postures. When we can catch them, we will know the convention that we can see with our eyes and touch with our hands. This is objective, external. Second, having practiced the first stage, a little bit of knowledge arises, it is called defilements due to Vipassana. It is important to avoid this, not being too glad with the knowing, and continuing to watch the mind. When we see, know, and understand our minds penetratingly, greed, hatred and delusion will be destroyed to some extent. Third, when greed, hatred, and delusion have gone down a bit, we'll feel joyfulness. When joy arises, fix on it, but don't be caught up in joy. We have to pull ourselves out of it. Keep watching the mind. At this stage, wisdom knowledge will appear that destroys or diminishes clinging and grasping. Fourth, when attachment has decreased, one will see, know, and understand normality. The body is normal, speech is normal and the mind is normal. This normality is called virtua concentration wisdom. Fifth, when seeing the state of arising passing, if one doesn't understand it, one will hold an abnormal view, but if one is fully aware, practice reaches its end. Therefore, I encourage you to try to practice until you meet with your own thoughts and are able to pull yourself out of them. Stages of practice. Determine to listen well, all lay people and monastic friends. When you determine to pay attention, you'll be able to remember. It is called knowing through memory and comprehension. From that, we study or practice to realize and truly know, or we have knowledge coming from our own vision and experience. Most people don't yet know and understand from studying and practicing, they only know how to make merit, to be generous, to keep precepts and to do tranquility meditation. But when it comes to more profound matters, that is to say, how to develop insight meditation, there are really very few people who know and understand it. With Vipassana it is usually a specific case, a specific individual, who knows and teaches it. Because of this, people are lazy and don't want to practice. As far as practice goes, they only know tranquility meditation, which they think is the same as doing Vipassana. This is because they still don't realize and really know. Their knowledge comes only through memory and comprehension. So, we make ourselves peaceful, but we don't understand clearly that there are two kinds of peace, namely peace under the influence of delusion, and peace due to awareness and wisdom. The path that is not a path. When we create the cause by meditating, the mind becomes peaceful as a result. For example, we recite the word Buddha. I used to do this, inhaling, Buddha, exhaling, though. While doing walking meditation one recites Buddha with every step, walking in accordance with the breathing. These things create peace because it is done slowly. After that, I met a teacher from the north named Sao, who told me that one cannot climb a tree from the top, that one has to start at the roots. He taught me to count 1, 2, 3, until 10, and back again 10, 9, 8, until 1. He said this is beginning at the beginning. This is another way of following the breath, inhaling say 1. Exhaling say 2, etc., the only difference being the words you use. Seeing the Dhamma. Seeing the Dhamma. In practicing Dhamma our views or intentions may not be the same, therefore the practice and the results of practice are not the same. Instead of talking about the differences in practice, I'll talk about seeing the Dhamma. To practice in order to see to Dhamma, some people have to sit or lie down with eyes closed and reflect. Then, they see colors, lights, ghosts, angels, heaven and hell or hungry ghosts and animals. This kind of seeing is fantasy or illusion, one thinks and then sees it. This is not right, according to the teachings of the Buddha, because when we open the eyes, we no longer see it. This is called defilement because we don't see our thoughts. The mind thinks but we don't see it, letting defilements deceive us or, one could say, letting them slap our face. This is not seeing the Dhamma. Seeing the Dhamma with awareness and wisdom, from really having developed insight, is the opposite. We must see ourselves, see materiality and mentality, comprehend rupa and nama. This is really seeing ourselves. We really see with open eyes, we see as we're acting, speaking, thinking, and doing various jobs. This is called seeing the Dhamma. The Dhamma is something that we have to see at the moment that we're doing good and doing evil, or neither good nor evil. To see the Dhamma with awareness and wisdom is to see like this. On seeing, one must be sure, the object of the seeing can't change into something else. This is really seeing the Dhamma. That's why I say that they are opposites, one is seeing an illusion, another is seeing with awareness and wisdom. In the past, I used to understand that it was as I just described, but when I really understood Dhamma, according to the teachings of the Buddha, I saw that that was wrong. We have to see ourselves in order to see the Dhamma. To see other things is defilement. Some teachers say that is seeing the Dhamma, that one has this and that knowledge. These are people who still do not understand. They create things with thought, it's not anything real. If it is real, one must really see oneself. Sitting we see, lying down we see, walking we see, wherever we come and go we see ourselves. This is called really seeing, seeing the Dhamma. To see the external, rupa, nama, is called seeing the bark of the Dhamma. To see with awareness ourselves acting, speaking, and thinking is to see on a deeper level. And to see, know, and understand thoughts arising is to see even more deeply. When seeing ourselves acting, talking, and thinking, something bad arises, we must conquer it. We don't act on it, we don't follow that low impulse. The Buddha said that low thoughts are defilements, they are suffering, they are forms of greed, hatred, or delusion. And when they are greed, hatred, or delusion, they will lead to suffering. Before we get angry or make a mistake, we don't see ourselves. We don't see our mind that is thinking. But when we do see ourselves as we're getting angry, we know that we're getting angry, and don't have to get angry. When we see our minds thinking like this, it stops. The Buddha calls this seeing, knowing, and understanding. Really seeing the Dhamma. To see the Dhamma, we must see the kind of Dhamma that the Buddha saw. We've heard that the Buddha went to study and practice Dhamma. Therefore we know that the Dhamma existed already before the Buddha. To exist already means that when we are born we already have Rupa and Nama, or a body and mind. This mind of ours is there already. But we never look at it, we look somewhere else. We watch other people doing good and bad. We criticize others. That's how it is. That's why I say that people don't see themselves. Some people, having been born, up to age 9 or 10, or even 100, until death, never watch materiality and mentality, never look at their own minds even once. Having been born a human being thus doesn't have any value. We can call it taking a loss in being born human. Some people watch themselves, once or twice perhaps before they die. So in coming together here, or coming to train ourselves, we must try to look at our mind. If we see our mind as it is thinking, even a little, on some occasions, we will develop the strength and ability to produce light inside our mind. Before this, our mind was dark and blind, but when we come to understand, and to see little by little, we're able to chase away the darkness or delusion. Darkness, here, does not mean the same as traveling without light. It's not like that. This darkness refers to our not seeing our own mind. In reality our mind, everyone's mind, is already clean, bright, and peaceful. Clean means not soiled, bright means seeing clearly. Seeing what? Seeing our life and our mind. Seeing it clearly. Peaceful means enough, stopping, no need to add anything by studying because there is just this much. For people to avoid suffering, we must watch right here. Therefore, the Buddha teaches that our not seeing our mind, can be compared to clouds or a murky sky concealing the sunlight. The light of the sun cannot reach the surface of the earth. At any moment that we don't see our life, don't see our mind, at that moment we are those whom the Buddha described as someone without awareness. One might even say someone with defilements because, at that moment defilements overwhelm us in our mind. And we follow the whims of those defilements, even though the mind itself remains clean, bright, and peaceful. That's why the Buddha teaches us to be aware, to comprehend and see clearly within ourselves. To see the Dhamma, we have to see ourselves. That is how the Buddha sees the Dhamma. When seeing like this, one can chase away greed, hatred, and delusion. In reality, greed, hatred, and delusion don't exist in us, they just flash up for a moment only. It is similar to ice. Ice is made into lumps, but the lumps don't endure. When they are exposed to the weather, they dissolve and return to their original state of being water. Greed, hatred, and delusion are similar, they don't endure, but only appear in a flash. When we don't see the course of events, we don't see their arising, and we can say, they slap our face. Or, like a car driving down the road, dust flutters at the back of the car, which passes in a moment, and the dust settles. Thought, that is greed, hatred, and delusion, is the same. They are only there for a short period, but we comply with them. So the Buddha taught us to see and understand our mind, to have enough awareness to keep up with, and know how to prevent thought, to know how to deal with and be able to really conquer the mind. This is seeing the Dhamma. You have to see it in this way. Don't see it any other way. Seeing the Dhamma can be compared to many things, for example, wind blowing against a tree. We don't know where the wind is, but the leaves flutter. Defilements are the same. They don't stay long, they just come up in a flash. But we act, speak, and think following them, these low things. The Buddha, therefore, said that they are kilesa. Defilements are suffering. We must try to make ourselves aware and to have the wisdom to watch and see our mind, to view all with knowing, to know in time, to know how to prevent and solve, and to be able to beat the defilements. When we see our thoughts like this, we see immediately what suffering is, what defilements are, and when we see that, then the thoughts, which are defilements or suffering, are not concocted any further. Really, the Buddha perceives it this way, and my understanding is that it really must be like this way. Because we don't see, we just follow what others do and don't give attention to this matter. We don't turn around to look at ourselves. Instead, we watch others acting, talking, and thinking, or we pay attention to cars, motorcycles, the environment, children, and so forth. We look over there, but we never turn to look at ourselves, not even once. When we don't look at ourselves, we forget ourselves, we get deluded just looking at others. The Buddha calls people like that someone with defilements or cankers. The word canker can be used to refer to defilement. We have come together to train in insight. The word Vipassana is just a Pali word. It is Dhamma language. In ordinary speech, it means clearly seeing. When we see clearly, we see differently from before, and make a shift in consciousness. What is it that insight sees clearly? It clearly sees ourselves acting, speaking, and thinking. That's what it sees. And it sees differently from before. Formerly we didn't understand that things are like this. A shift in consciousness. We stop things that are bad because we are no longer deluded. In the past we used to revere ghosts and angels, gamble, drink alcohol, take various kinds of drugs, go out at night to watch shows and so forth. We used to do these things, but when we see that all of this amounts only to desires and defilements, we stop. But our mind itself abides in normality. It desires nothing. It is clean, bright, and peaceful in itself. But when something arises, it happens in a flash. We get lost in it because we don't see it in time. This is precisely the point at which the Buddha said the mind gets overwhelmed by defilements, or, putting it into simple language, where the defilements slap our faces. When the defilements slap our face, we have to do as they say because we can't beat them, they are the boss. Therefore, we must become their master, having power over them through awareness and wisdom, through the development of insight, through clear seeing, for example. When we can see like this, defilements cannot come close, cannot arise, because we see the defilements now. In order to see like this, we must practice in the right way, we must comprehend the origin of thought. It compares with someone who wants to have the light on, but doesn't know how to go about it. That person doesn't know the source that makes the light appear. He has seen light coming from the bulb, so he turns and twists at the bulb. He may continue with that action until he dies, but no light is going to appear because he's not doing things as they should be done. He doesn't know the starting point of the light. But someone who is smart, who knows the real source of the light, won't take hold of the light bulb. He'll just turn the switch, and the light appears at the bulb. Practicing insight meditation is the same. If we're clever, and we know, see, and understand according to the Buddha's way, we comprehend that greed, hatred, and delusion don't exist in us, that suffering of that kind really doesn't exist in us. Though we don't know the method, we want to deal with that kind of suffering. We want to find a solution for greed, hatred, and delusion. We want to chase it away. So we practice meditation to develop insight, sit or lie down with eyes closed to get some peace, and we get peace, but that kind of peace is not the same as seeing clearly. It is peace in the cave. When we're in a cave, we see inside the cave, but the cave itself we don't see. When we make a fire, it is true that the darkness disappears, but we're still surrounded by darkness, and as soon as the fire goes out, the darkness comes back, faster than the speed of sound. Now, we come out of the cave and there is no more need to light a fire. Being outside, we can see inside the cave as well as outside of it. We see everything. This kind of peace is not the same as the other kind, it is not the same as the kind of peace we experienced when we were still in the cave. This is seeing clearly, and when we see clearly there is peace. That is why, I say that there are two kinds of peace. Peace in the cave is one kind of peace. It is peace without seeing, without comprehending the cave. As for the peace outside the cave, it is not that kind of peace. It is a peace as a result of seeing clearly. Seeing clearly is a kind of peace. What kind of peace is peace, due to seeing clearly? It is peace due to the absence of greed, hatred, and delusion. One is peaceful because he is not caught up in anything. This is peace due to seeing clearly. When things are clear, they're peaceful. One can call it peace or not call it peace, because the word peace is just convention. This kind of peace is without defilement because one sees the defilements at every moment. The Buddha teaches in this way, but regardless, this is what we want. We want peace. It's just that we don't know the method for turning on the light. When we do know the method, and the time comes to do it, we turn the switch and click, light appears at the light bulb over there. When we have developed insight in the right way and someone says something, good or bad, our awareness and wisdom do their job as fast as lightning. The speed of awareness and wisdom that arises from developing insight, compares with a cat and a rat. However fast the rat is, the cat is on the lookout already. As soon as the rat comes jumping over, the cat grabs it, whack. At the moment the cat pounces on it, the rat dies of shock, that very instant. The blood doesn't run because the rat is so shocked, never been caught by a cat before. The cat eats the rat without blood flowing. It is the same with the mind. When we are watching like this, a thought comes up and, whack. The thought is intercepted immediately because we see clearly and really know. There is enough awareness, it is in time, we can prevent and deal with the thought, and we conquer it. So the mind doesn't get concocted, and there are no defilements. This is the way the Buddha teaches. Therefore, to see clearly like this is the highest merit and wholesomeness in Buddhism. Or, to say it another way, it is seeing the Dhamma. To see the Dhamma is to see what? To see the outer Dhamma, is to see materiality and mentality, or to see oneself acting, talking, and thinking. This is one part. The other part is to see the mind as it is thinking. The mind is not anything solid that can be seen with the eyes. It has to be seen through awareness and wisdom. The Buddha talks about having sharp faculties, the faculty of sight. This is a deeper level of seeing the Dhamma. The ability to see like this, is something that everyone already possesses without exception. That's why the Buddha said, the Dhamma is there already. When we were born this existed already, but it was turned over, just like something that is turned over and no one turns it back up. So we don't see it. Or it's just like something that is closed, and there is no one to open it up. But now, our Buddha opens it up or turns it upright, so that people can see it immediately. This is the reason why, when the Buddha would go around expounding the Dhamma, those who listened with determination would open the eye with which to see the Dhamma, or they would enter the stream of Nibbana, as it is called. The Buddha illustrated seeing the Dhamma in many ways. Lotuses or other types of flowers, whatever color they may have, be it red, white, purple, or whatever, are all ready to bloom when they get in touch with sunlight. The method to develop insight is the same. If just this is pointed out, we simply practice at this one point, and everyone is able to do it because the Dhamma is there already. But if no one calls attention to this important point, we just keep fumbling about, and we don't know. In reality, we all want to be without suffering. We just don't know the method to extinguish suffering. We only want what is good, but we don't know what evil is. When we don't know evil, we take it to be something good. When we don't understand that those things are bad, it is as if we're walking along the road, and we don't want to step in dog droppings. When we don't watch our feet as we're walking, we'll step right into it, and it smells awful. We won't say that we want the stench, but in the meantime it is stuck to our shoes. So we go and wash it off, but sometimes the smell lingers on, because it got kind of absorbed in the solace. This is just the same. We don't want evil, but we simply don't know where evil is lurking, or how to wash it off. Evil is to be deluded, to be caught up in ourselves, to not see our very mind and life, to not see our mind the moment that it thinks. To see the mind as it is thinking, is to see the Dhamma, the Buddha says. This is seeing the Dhamma on the more subtle level. The Buddha said at one point that virtue is the means to eliminate the crude defilements, concentration is the means to eliminate the medium defilements, and wisdom is the means to eliminate the refined defilements. My teachers used to say this, but I didn't understand it. Virtue, which is supposed to eliminate the coarse defilements, is not that kind of virtue. That is just virtue of society. Can we eliminate defilements by making merit, making offerings, and keeping precepts? It is meritorious, but it still can't deal with defilements. We have all made merit, made offerings, and kept precepts. That is just virtuous conduct, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm referring to the practice of Dhamma. The practice of Dhamma and virtuous conduct are different. The latter is merit, and it is wholesome, but it can't deal with defilements. So it's just a matter to do with society. The way to make merit, make offerings, and keep precepts still differs from neighborhood to neighborhood, from village to village, from district to district, and from province to province. Because it is still an affair of society. It is a matter of views and opinions, that is not yet the Dhamma. One does whatever one wants to do. One does things according to one's opinions and desires, doing things out of greed, like being in a cave. We see it in the dark, depending on candles, lit temporarily only. As we're making merit, we feel slightly happy. Like a lump of ice, it only stays in a solid state for a short time. It's hard to mold water into a lump, or to catch the wind and make it into a lump. It's not easy to do. How does one grab it? One might be able to grab some water, but not for long, it won't remain. Therefore, the teachings of the Buddha are extremely deep and profound. Only people with little dust in their eyes, or people who are determined and interested to use his teachings in practice, as the way to do something about suffering, can understand it. But if we don't want those teachings and we're not interested in using them to do something about suffering, then the teachings of the Buddha are hard to understand, hard to figure out, because we don't look at ourselves. We don't see ourselves. Ordinary people can only understand things that are solid, objects that can be seen with the eyes and touched with the hands. But on a deeper level, that is to say on the level of the mind, on the level of our life, we've never looked and never seen. But when we see and understand, we see something supreme and marvelous. Marvelous means something that we've never had, seen, or known to be like this. When we see, know, and understand, we disseminate the teaching of the Buddha that we have practiced, so that people who don't yet know, may know, people who don't yet see, may see, and people who don't yet understand, may understand. As for the people who are not yet interested in such talk, the Buddha said to just leave them, let them go. You can't get everyone to accept it. The Buddha was the same. When he was still alive, he taught, according to his vision, knowledge, and understanding. As he saw and understood things, he would explain them. And we are the same, we must try to revive the teachings of the Buddha and spread them. These days, there are plenty of people who claim to spread the teachings of the Buddha, but they understand little, they don't understand much. Some people snatch teachings about ghosts and spread them, and then they claim that they are the teachings of the Buddha. Others seize the teaching of Brahmanism and spread them, saying that it is Buddhism. Others grab hold of the teachings of sects that revere angels, and they disseminate those teachings, claiming them to be the Buddha's words, and so forth. People who practice this way can't make head or tail of things, So the whole lot is, falsely, claimed to be Buddhism. This is an unfortunate state of affairs. These days, we can see this quite easily. Magical teachers bless medallions, and recite incantations over amulets and talismans. They hang them around your neck, or tie them around your waist, and tell you that you are invulnerable to getting stabbed by a knife, or getting shot by a gun. This is a misunderstanding of reality. Some people teach respect to and fear of ghosts, and offer things to them. It goes as far as that. Some people teach the awaiting of lucky signs and auspicious times before going ahead with matters. If the omens are not good, they don't do it. Some people perform ceremonies and sacrifices to make requests from the angels, for help in ridding themselves of bad things. These are not the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha doesn't teach us to bow to ghosts. These practices existed already before the time of the Buddha. They have existed since time immemorial. These opinions are similar to being in a cave and lighting a fire. The darkness hides on the opposite side of us, it doesn't go far. As soon as the fire goes out, it's dark, and we can't get out of the cave. But when we stand outside the cave, we can look back into the cave and see the darkness, we can see the shape of the cave, we can look around us and see everything. Nothing is concealed from us. To see like this is not the same as before. I'm telling you this so that you understand. When you practice, understand things as the Buddha teaches, then you are a disciple of the Buddha. When we see according to the Buddha's way, we don't have to be afraid of ghosts or angels. In the chants praising the virtues of the Buddha, it says that he is the teacher of gods and men. No need to mention ghosts, the Buddha is the teacher of even the gods. But we never see these angels, we don't know where they live, so we have to use some intelligence here. We have eyes, ears, and so on. The eyes are for looking, the ears are for listening, the nose is for smelling, and so forth. That's how we get to know things. We must see both what is good and what is bad. Our ears get to listen to what is good, as well as to what is bad. Our nose smells both good and unpleasant odors. We know things this way. If we don't use awareness and wisdom, we'll follow our moods and go wrong in an instant. Once we have gone off, it's difficult to solve the problem, sometimes we can't solve it at all. If we know that we have gone wrong, we listen and solve the problem. This is called being a pundit. We never heard it and never thought about it, but when we listen, we adapt and solve the problem ourselves. This is called being wise. But some people hear the teachings of the Buddha, and it just goes over their heads. They are people with thick heads, they don't listen. When one doesn't listen, one doesn't solve one's problems. These people have dust in their eyes, they are like flowers that are unable to bloom, as the Buddha said. The Buddha gave this comparison. There exist 4 types of lotuses. The first kind has risen above the surface of the water, and is ready to bloom as soon as the sun comes out. The second kind blooms after receiving sunlight for several days. The third kind is still submerged, and the fourth kind is still stuck in the mud, food for the fish and the turtles. It's like this. When we listen, we must determine to listen, and, having listened, we must determine to put it into practice. We must practice within ourselves, not believe fancy teachings. Don't believe them. Like guns that won't shoot, and knives that won't cut. The Buddha teaches with awareness and wisdom. He doesn't teach in that style. Have you observed it, these days, that in Thailand we have more problems because of the incantations? When we have amulets and medallions, we go and steal, rob, kill, drink and gamble, thinking that we are invulnerable. The Buddha says that this is wrong. Fools come into being in this way. Don't go and mess with them, don't have anything to do with them. Instead of blessing medallions, better to bless yourself to be awake. Those incantations are just fantasy, they are for people without eyes, ears, and a nose. It is wrong teaching. Even monks still teach it, until someone gets killed, and people scramble for the medallions, as we can read in the newspaper sometimes. When someone has gone wrong, how can he or she practice rightly? The Buddha affirmed, we are told, that whether Buddhism flourishes or degenerates depends upon the 4 types of Buddhists, i.e., bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, male and female monks, laymen and laywomen. If there is progress, it is because they listen and understand and practice correctly in accordance with the teachings of the Buddha. Buddhism should prosper and be safe in the future. But if it degenerates or disappears, it must be because of the 4 types of Buddhists. If they have not listened properly, remembered wrongly, and practiced in the wrong way, degeneration and destruction must follow. But the teachings of the Buddha prosper in themselves. Whoever practices accordingly makes progress and is safe. Every time we make merit, we invite monks to come and chant. The monks chant, but they chant in Pali, so we don't understand. When we don't understand, what is sacred or auspicious about it? It is not so, because we don't understand. It's only auspicious when we understand that it is sacred and auspicious. The monks chant, Namo, Thassa, Bhagavato, Arahato, Samma Sambuddhassa, and then, Bhutang, Dhammang, Sangkhang, etc. This is supposed to be wholesome, but it is chanted in Pali, and we don't understand it. It is actually wholesome, but it is in Pali, so we should translate it in order that we understand. Is it sacred to chant Namo Thassa? Can we bless anything that way? No. First, it has to be translated. Namo Thassa, Bhagavato means, homage to the Blessed One, Arahato means, one who is far from defilements, from enemies, far from danger, Samma Sambuddhassa, the Buddha sees like that, know like that. That's what we hear, so we should practice like that, according to the teachings of the Buddha, so we can be taken to be one who practices, following the Buddha. When people are shooting each other, stabbing each other, getting drunk or gambling, don't go close. This is being far from defilements. The defilements want to go, we must stay far away. Next, the monks chant, Bhutang, Saranang, Gacchami, I take refuge in the Buddha, who can really eliminate danger. If we have confidence in the teachings of the Buddha, we can really eliminate suffering and danger. Dhammang, Saranang, Gacchami, I take refuge in the Dhamma, which can really eliminate danger, it is true. If we have confidence in the teachings of the Buddha, we can really eliminate danger. Sangkhang, Saranang, Gacchami, I take refuge in the Sangha, which can really eliminate danger. But the trouble is that we don't have confidence. And so, we can't eliminate danger. To say that we don't have confidence is not quite correct. We don't understand. We don't comprehend. We don't know whether the monks who chant can eliminate danger or not. Maybe they don't understand either, because they don't talk about themselves. And so, we practice along, without comprehending. After that, the monks chant, Yojak Kuma, Mohamalah Bagadto, which means, the Noble One has the sight of wisdom, and has removed the stain of delusion. Delusion is to be caught up in something. To remove delusion is to remove identification with things. Samanwaputto Sukhatho Awimutto, when delusion has been removed, one is a well-gone one, that is, one goes well, one comes well, one doesn't stumble into things or fall into a ditch. One follows the clear path, namely, we get out of the cave. To be out of the cave means to be beyond thought. If we live in a cave, we're not willing to come out of it, so we don't see the cave. We never see our own thoughts, even once, from birth to death we never see our own thoughts. Some people say they know and see thought, but they don't see it, because they see and know it within the cave, so they are under the power of defilements. They can't eliminate delusion. The teachings of the Buddha are for really seeing, for really knowing. If we don't see and know, our practice is faulty. Therefore, making merit, making offerings and keeping precepts, if we do it right, really is merit, is wholesome, it is virtuous and is Dhamma. But if it is done wrongly, it's not merit, it's not virtuous, nor is it Dhamma, and one doesn't get merit or anything wholesome. That's the way it is. Then the monks chant, Asavanajjapalanang, Bhuntathananjasavanat. This is the Pali language. We don't understand it, but we think it is holy and is able to chase off ghosts, bad luck and misfortune. That's true, actually, if we understand it. Without understanding, it can't chase away anything. Asavanajjapalanang means we don't associate with fools, we won't mess with them, we won't have anything to do with them, we won't believe what they say. For example, people who drink booze, gamble, take drugs, quarrel and argue, using weapons, are these people fools or are they wise? The Buddha says they are fools, don't associate with them. Bhuntathananjasavanat, we respect things that are useful, we don't revere ghosts, we don't beseech ghosts. What are ghosts? A ghost is someone who does evil, speaks evil, and thinks evil. People who are foul-mouthed we call demons. Don't mess with that kind of people. People who do good, speak nicely and think in good ways, they are just like angels. A good heart, just like the Dhamma. That's what we say where I come from. It is convention, these words, but it is true too. The Buddha teaches like this. So when we venerate people with virtuous qualities, we don't do anything wrong and we don't speak improperly. This is what is meant by Pochajakpuachanayanan, Athammankalamuthamang. This is auspicious for us, it is auspicious to obey the teachings of the Buddha. Just as monks coming to chant is not auspicious in itself, it is not right when we don't understand. Going deeper, the real fool, or the inner fool, is delusion, and the internal wise one is awareness wisdom, the quality of knowing. Really comprehend this. That we're developing insight is in order to see clearly. Seeing clearly and, that type of, peace, are two different things. If we don't feel our minds thinking, we still don't understand the teachings of the Buddha deeply enough, even though we may be making merit, offering things, observing precepts, developing tranquility meditation, and even developing insight meditation. People may say that they are meditating, but it is still not considered to be profound knowledge. That is how I understand it. Even though someone may never have entered a monastery, never listened to a Dhamma talk, never observed the precepts, if that person feels his or her mind thinking and realizes it, that individual has come close to the Buddha. Or one might say that he or she abides with the Buddha. Have you ever heard that the Buddha said, "Whoever sees the Dhamma sees me, whoever doesn't see the Dhamma, doesn't see me." Even though taking hold of a corner of my robe or of my finger, he doesn't see me? Don't think that seeing the Dhamma means to see colors, lights, crystal balls, or ghosts, angels, heaven and hell. That is just fantasy. It's not the Dhamma. To see the Dhamma, we have to see ourselves acting, speaking, and thinking. That's one part of it. Another, deeper part is to see the mind as it is thinking. This pacifies greed, hatred, and delusion. But if one listens properly and puts them into use, they are not too deep. Insight can be developed easily by our studying and developing awareness. The Buddha teaches that developing awareness has great benefit. We know from the books that the Buddha said there are two things that are of great assistance, namely sati, recollection, and sampajanya, awareness. Teachers tell us to recollect before acting, speaking and thinking, and to be aware while acting, speaking and thinking. These are still mere words, the person who utters them might still not comprehend, or it may be that he or she might, in fact, know. We are not aware of whether that teacher does or not, because he or she doesn't say so. How do we practice with this? In addition to knowing the words, we must know the method of practice. It's not just a matter of learning how to talk, being able to tell others. Being able to talk is not the same as practice. In practice, we really have to practice, we have to train. Suppose we have an iron ingot for making a knife. Can we cut anything with it? No, it is still a bar of iron. We have to melt it first and make that knife, or an axe, or a hoe out of it, before we can use it according to its function. To practice insight, we develop awareness in this fashion, and we will know according to the function and law of nature. If we don't know how the method works, we'll use it in the wrong way, straight off. The teachings of the Buddha are useful, but if we don't know how to use them, just studying them, remembering them, and then boasting about our knowledge, this is not right. It is boasting that we know more than others, using the Pali as a weapon. The 84,000 teachings of the Buddha are for studying in order to remember, and then to use as a solution to suffering. Having studied them, we use them in order to abandon defilements. The teachings are not to be used for studying and then seeking profit, status, and fame. The Buddha wants us to study, remember, and then to use the teachings as a tool, for dealing with and abandoning suffering. When we have solved and abandoned suffering, we can work, make a living, and buy and sell without suffering. That's what he teaches. It's not that after knowing the Dhamma, we don't work and make money. That's not correct. Don't understand it that way. The word defilement doesn't refer to money, cars, or houses. It refers to greed, hatred, and delusion, jealousy and oppression. Working to earn money, so one can buy a car, depends on our effort and on how much we save. This we consider as working according to our duties. If we can't save $1, we can't save $10 or $20. But if we can save $1, then when we have $10 or $100, we can save it. The Buddha teaches us to save and to work according to duty. Parents as well as children do their duties. Teachers, students, policemen, soldiers, government officials, and everyone does their duties. When everyone is doing his duty, the country is in peace, is cool, and we live without suffering. Be happy with the work you're doing, don't be happy with someone else's work. The wise say work in order to work, don't work in order to get. Work following your duty. We don't understand this matter like this. Whatever work we do we just want to get. It is like this, it is working for the defilements. The defilements want to get. They command us, and we suffer, because we are forced by defilements. When we have some project and we can't carry it out, we're disappointed, we suffer. This is because we don't work according to duty, we don't know how to work in order to work. So don't think like that, but follow your duty. Suppose we come and stay here. We come to develop insight. We have to do it, whether we know or not. We have to listen to the teacher. When the teacher says to do walking meditation, we should do it. We walk in order to build up awareness, feel these little movements. We know in full awareness the movements of the body, turning the hand up and down, raising and lowering the arm, walking back and forth, leaning to the right and the left, bending and raising the head, blinking the eyes, opening the mouth, swallowing saliva, breathing in and out, etc. This is called being aware. Train in awareness. See, know, and understand. Get familiar with awareness. When the mind thinks, be ready, waiting for it with awareness, just like a cat and a rat. The mind thinks. We know, see, and understand, and the thoughts come to a halt, right away. When thought ceases, it is not concocted further. Of this the Buddha says, dependent origination is not being conditioned. The Buddha explains through dependent origination that avidya is the condition for the arising of formations. Formations are the conditions for the birth of consciousness, consciousness conditions mentality materiality, namarupa give rise to the six senses, the six senses concoct contact, contact is the ground for feeling to arise, and it goes on until it turns to sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. That's how it goes. Now, we see thought. We see, know, and understand. Thought stops and so there is no avidya. There is no avidya because we see and know. Therefore, it changes into Vijjat. Vijjat translates as seeing clearly. As for avidjat, it means not knowing. Avidjat is not knowing, but, actually, it is a kind of knowledge, but it is not a clear seeing. Avidjat is to not see our mind, Vijjat is to see our mind. This is Dhamma on the deep level. This is the source of merit. It is the origin of wholesomeness, the source is right here. Problems and suffering are born right here. We have to study according to the Buddha's teaching. If we don't see this point, right here, it means that we don't see the origin of suffering, we don't see the origin of merit. They are opposites like this, there is bright and dark, there is white and black. When there is blackness, we don't see anything white, and if there is whiteness, we don't see blackness. When there is darkness, there is no brightness, when there is brightness, there is no darkness. If we catch this point, there is no delusion. There is no greed, hatred, and delusion. We don't have to chase it away. We think that they exist because we don't see them, we don't see the defilements over here. We say that we want to let go of defilements but we don't see them and so we can't let them go. There are no defilements. The method, to see your mind, right here. When we see our mind every moment, at all times, every second, this is called training ourselves. When it is like this, when we are working and someone blames us or praises us, the speed of awareness really catches up with the good or bad things in the mind. It flashes in, really fast, faster than sound, faster than light, even faster than electricity or whatever is fast. Awareness that has been trained, the mind that has been trained, is like this. I dare to insist and guarantee that the teachings of the Buddha are a pair with the world, they don't avoid the world. Whoever can practice like this is called someone beyond the world. Being beyond the world doesn't mean going up into the sky. Being beyond the world means to be above the objects of the mind, beyond suffering. When it is finished, there is nothing that can proliferate anymore. It is as we chant, we sung Karaka Thang Jit Thang, the mind has reached the state that cannot be concocted anymore. That's what it's like. Experiences in practice by monk disciples. Luangpor Teean Su 1 No. Wat Pa Sukatho, Gangkro District, Chayapam Province. Practicing Dhamma with Luangpor Teean. In 1965, a meditation center at the Budayan Forest, in Lahi Province, was renowned. Everyone knew that Luangpor Teean had established it. It was said that people who studied and practiced there would realize and really see the truth. There would be no more doubt about death and rebirth, about heaven and hell, about path and fruit, attainments. Some people persuaded me to take a look at it, because at that time I was trying hard with the Buddha meditation method to get peaceful, which I was reasonably successful at, but I still had doubts about death and rebirth, heaven and hell, path, fruit and nibbana. This made me think of Luangpor Teean all the time. I kept looking for a chance to meet him. Before Luangpor Buntum, who is a relative of mine, ordained, we had talked together about meditation. When he ordained, he went to practice with Luangpor Teean, beginning on 1966. At that time, I hadn't ordained yet. I had the opportunity to practice the Dhamma with him at the Budayan Forest in Lahi. He taught the rhythmic meditation and walking meditation. At that time, I didn't like the rhythmic meditation very much. I was used to practicing Buddha, to sit still, and I was able to make the mind peaceful quickly. But Luangpor taught not to go for peacefulness. He taught to be aware all the time, to know the movements while doing the rhythmic meditation and not to get caught up in peacefulness. It was opposite to the method that I had been doing. Sometimes, I didn't feel like doing it. There was lots of resistance in the mind. Luangpor explained and showed me how to do it. The things he would talk about, his knowledge, I didn't have yet, I couldn't do it yet. Luangpor said to throw away my knowledge and my way of practicing, this produced misgivings. Sometimes he talked in a challenging way, saying, "How much money did you get a month? When you were working? I answered, at least 1000 baht. All right, said Luangpor Teean, you come here to practice Dhamma, to do the rhythmic meditation and to do walking meditation in order to be aware. If you don't get any knowledge, if there is no change in your mind, different from before, I will give you 1000 baht as compensation. But you have to really practice and follow my instructions completely. That's what he said to me. Maybe he saw that I had a lot of views. In the end I decided to do it. I had come already and I'd try it out. I tried to go against my original feeling. I determined to practice the rhythmic meditation to give rise to sati sampajanya. When one builds up awareness, awareness is what one gets. I practiced continuously. When thought would arise, I would be aware of it and come back to the dynamic meditation. When peace arose, I would be aware of it, I wouldn't be caught up in the peacefulness. I knew the body and mind more clearly. There was more sati sampajanya. I could keep up with the movements of the body and I could keep up with the mind thinking. Wisdom knowledge arose, I knew rupanama, I knew the body and the mind according to reality, in levels within the basic stage of materiality mentality. There was a shift in the mind, different from before. Doubt disappeared. I understood the difference between tranquility meditation and insight meditation. About 60% of my suffering was gone. I felt very confident in Luangpor Teean's teaching. My previous knowledge just melted away. I used to study magic and superstition. I saw that that was just convention. The rites and rituals that I used to perform I could give up, just like that. I felt confident in what I was doing. I understood what merit and evil are. I understood about heaven and hell. I understood religion and Buddhism. It was as if I was carrying 100 kilos and 60 kilos dropped off me when wisdom knowledge arose. Practicing only that much and I felt so much lighter. What would happen if I were to practice some more? I really had a lot of confidence in this method of using movements in order to develop awareness. Luangpor pointed out the levels of practice. He said, this is just the basic stage of meditation. Don't get attached to it and think you've got a lot of knowledge, there is still much more. You have to determine to keep on practicing. Work more with the mind and you will get to know the stage of ultimate meaning. He asked me, do you really see? Do you believe me, or do you believe yourself? I answered, I believe myself. Luangpor was clever. He taught to see the reality of life, everyone must see like this in order for it to be right. I didn't have to look for a teacher anymore because I got the most perfect lesson in my life from a teacher who couldn't read or write. Luangpor Teean's conduct. In the year 1966, Luangpor still couldn't read Thai, he could only read Lao. He couldn't write Thai but he was diligent, both in training to read and to write, as well as in teaching disciples. I've helped him with reading many times. Whatever Luangpor taught, he would practice, he would explain things and show us how to do it. His life was very simple, sitting and lying down, eating. His daily life was orderly, he gave his disciples a lot of attention, never being worried about difficulties. He gave himself up physically as well as his personal belongings. He tried hard to use his life for others. He wanted people to really know the Dhamma. Even though more than 30 years passed, Luangpor's conduct never changed. I respect him as having been a person with the greatest virtues, this feeling will never degenerate in my life. What happened at the Budayan forest? Those who lived at the Budayan forest in those days were determined to study and practice the Dhamma together as one. There were no papers with the schedule on it attached to the doors of the monks' huts, as is the case these days. There were 20 to 30 people there, but it was just as if there was no one there. It was really quiet. One had to be careful when asking questions because there was only just rhythmic meditation and walking meditation going on. Once, I asked a novice who was doing the rhythmic meditation something, he wasn't willing to talk to me. The teachings of Luangpor in those old days consisted mainly of just practice. In the early morning, One could hear the sound of monks doing walking meditation and the sound of dew falling on banana leaves. In Lahi province there is a lot of dew. On hearing the dew dripping on banana leaves, one knew that it was exactly 3 a.m. Everyone would get up and start to practice. The sound of footsteps of the walking meditation could then be heard together, with the sound of the dew falling on the banana leaves, tup, tup, tup. The light of the lanterns was dimmed by the passing dust. In a day, there would be heaps of ants. I got the taste of the Dhamma that arose from developing awareness. I got more and more answers to the questions of my life. We stayed in little huts. When it rained we would get a little bit wet. We got in touch with life without excessive comforts. When eating, we would sometimes pour some water from our kettle onto the chili that was beginning to run out, an immediate solution to the problem. The water for washing the bowl had to be poured together in one vessel, and then used to wash other dishes. After that it would be used to water the trees that had been planted. The water for drinking and bathing was about a kilometer away from the retreat place. When going to bathe, one had to find some container to put water in and carry it back. One had to fully look after oneself. The young monks, on seeing the old monks carrying cans of water back to their huts, would carry it for them. Poverty made us use life in an orderly way without shrinking back. We were not afraid of difficulties. Sometimes, I would save the plastic bags that lay people would wrap food in, to fix up the leaking roof. I put forth steady effort and was very enthusiastic. The walking meditation path glistened from our walking so much. The wood in the hut where I would sit was marked from one sitting a lot in the same spot. As I was doing the rhythmic meditation or the walking meditation, it felt as though there was only just this one person in the world, no division into this and that. It would run counter to one's feelings to get an invitation from lay people, to eat at their house and perform certain ceremonies. One would think about his walking path and miss the seat in one's hut. Those places provided a meditator with peace and coolness, and gave him a sense of dignity. One would feel proud of doing walking meditation and of the times that one would develop awareness, by practicing the rhythmic meditation. This kind of work is something that gives one honor in life. One doesn't become fed up with it. Some days, while doing the rhythmic meditation in the hut, Luangpor would come by. I could remember the sound of his footsteps. "Are you here?" "I'm here, Luangpor." "What are you doing?" "I'm doing the rhythmic meditation." "Do you see outside as well as inside?" "I don't see outside, I only see what is inside." "What do you do to see outside?" "I open the door." "All right, then open the door." When I opened the door, Luangpor told me, "Make sure you see outside as well as inside, don't only just see outside or only just inside. Keep the mind in the middle." Having said that, he continued to walk to the next hut. I understood that Luangpor talked the language of the mind, that looking at the body and looking at the mind, working with the mind, must be like this. To get caught up in thought is wrong, the mind going out too much is wrong. One should be the observer. Whatever arises, watch it with the inner eye, that is to say, with awareness and wisdom. Don't want it, don't be it. In the morning and the evening, after the chanting, Luangpor used to give instructions. There were no tapes to listen to or books to read, we would only hear the teachings of Luangpor, and we would get to know the stages of practice that would arise in the mind from developing awareness. The mind would change progressively, one knows and sees by oneself. The words of Luangpor, in Dhamma language, that point things out, together with his diligent practice, made us realize that it is possible to understand, find, and see the Dhamma. It can be done. One can be liberated. The short interviews were not just thought-out questions, it was coming from experience, the results of meditation. It had nothing to do with reflections or analyses through reasoning. Rather, it is a fixed law of nature that exists already. It starts with rupanama, real things that actually exist. One gets energized continuously until there is not more ground for suffering to arise. There is not self anywhere. Luangpor taught just this. He pointed it out clearly, just as if he would take us by the hand, not letting us think and guess about it. When suffering doesn't have a base, it dries up, it doesn't sprout anymore. When the end of suffering is reached, there is nothing further to do. It is called according to reality, the remainder-less extinction of Namarupa. I'm not sure whether this is in the scriptures or not, I'm talking according to actuality. It cannot be termed otherwise. Luangpor's teachings pointed this out crystal clear. It's not that he just taught in order for us to understand intellectually. He taught to be. For example, a leech that sucks out blood. We didn't see it before, but when conditions are such that it drops off, we see it and we feel disgusted. But when the leech was stuck to us, we didn't know. This is similar to defilements in the mind. We give them the free hand as long as we don't know and understand. When we know, see, and understand them, they slip off. We feel in the same way as with the leech. When we are disgusted, we know, and then there is no need to ask anyone. Our lives come to an end at this point. We begin to study and practice the Dhamma with the form of rhythmic movements and walking meditation, developing awareness. I don't know whether other forms or methods are like this, also. I hold to this principle of developing awareness, using movements. Luangpor is my teacher. Whether this method can be found in the scriptures or not, may those who are intelligent reflect on it by themselves. What I've been writing so far is only just a small part, there is still much more, but it is not appropriate to say too much at this time. I guarantee that one day, if you have time to do the rhythmic meditation and develop awareness through walking meditation, looking at the bodily movements and the thoughts in the mind, knowing them in time, able to chase and catch them, your existing problems and condition will confess and surrender because there is evidence. Those things will no longer harm you. You will become free. Life will be deathless, beyond birth, old age, sickness and death. The teachings of Luangpor spread gradually and continuously, until they reached the capital and went abroad. As long as there are human beings on this planet, of whatever nationality, if one studies one will find it just the same. I invite you to go ahead and study, whether you can read and write or not is not important. When Luangpor was very sick, he still kept teaching. He really dedicated his life to others. At the time that Luangpor had not yet ordained, he tried his best to let everyone see what he had discovered. I have spent a rains retreat at his home village. The old people there, as well as the young, told me about it. Not only that, but I've seen small well-built huts, 20 or 30 of them, built with his own money, so that people could practice. Also the food, which he would take care of by himself. When Luangpor was still a layman, he was rich and held a good position. He was an important trader in Chiang Khon district, Laos province. He had a big steamboat to take goods along the Mekong River. He would go as far up as Luang Prabang, Laos, and as far down as Nakhon Phanom, Thailand. In those days, one could freely trade between Laos and Thailand. On both sides of the river, people knew Nai Hoi, the trader, Teean. His real name was not Teean, it was Pun, but it was a tradition of people around there to call people according to their firstborn child. People thought it offensive to call someone directly by one's name. If we would call him Luangpor Pun, those people would take that to be a lack of respect. When Luangpor was a layman, many people respected and obeyed him. He was the headman of the village, and he used to be the leader in merit-making ceremonies. He offered enough money to build a whole temple. There are many things about him that haven't been mentioned. I don't mean to boast with these things. He was just an ordinary person like us, but he was someone who was able to discover the truth in this time and age. We should take him as our example. Before practicing with Luangpor, he would say that he used to make merit, ordained, performed the robe offering ceremony, built a ceremonial hall and did everything that is considered meritorious, but he didn't get to know the Dhamma that way. This made me think, hey, I didn't do as many meritorious things as Luangpor, I probably don't have a chance to know and see the Dhamma. But, in fact, it is not like that. Rich people as well as poor people can know, if one really practices and experiences bare and full awareness for a long enough period. Luangpor has been insisting on this all the way through. He challenged everyone and encouraged them to try it out and verify it for themselves. I would like to say that the reason I am a disciple of Luangpor is not because of his biography, not because of his external behavior, not because of hearing his words, or because of what people said about him. But it was because I tried out the method of developing awareness by using movements, and many, many results followed, until, in the end, there was nothing left of the word suffering. This was because of practicing according to Luangpor Teean's method. It is his teaching. To say that it is the method that the Buddha teaches is not incorrect. I'm not praising Luangpor Teean. I'm not bragging. I'm talking about what is practical, what is possible, what can be done in this lifetime. One doesn't have to wait for death, everyone can do it, can have it, can be it. Luangpor Teean is my teacher. I have followed everything he taught me, rhythmic and walking meditation, in order to generate awareness, to see the movements of the body with awareness, and to see thoughts in the mind with awareness, and to be the watcher of these two natural phenomena. Awareness and realization are the inner eye, they are the witness to the body and the mind, until one sees these two natural phenomena, and one gets the insight that they are only just material and mental things. They are not any self, they are just nature. Having seen it, one really knows that they are just rupa and nama, one knows how to deal with them and the problem is finished. One is beyond them. Next, Luangpor teaches to look at the suffering that is associated with rupa and nama. We look at materiality first, which is rupa dhamma. When we look at it with awareness, we see that it is a heap or a mass of suffering. We breathe to relieve suffering, we eat to extinguish suffering. When standing, sitting, walking and lying down we change position in order not to have suffering. Then, we see rupa disease. We must find a way to solve sickness and pain. The suffering of the body can only be remedied, it cannot be abandoned. If there is no remedy, that's the end of it, that is what rupa dhamma is like. As for nama dhamma, it can be realized. We watch the states of the mind, just as if we're sitting in a room that has windows, whatever arises, we see immediately. Originally the mind is in a state of normality, but objects come floating in, they are like guests. One sees gladness and sadness. One sees the mind that loves, gets angry, has greed and is deluded. One sees all of it because one is the watcher. When we look, we will see, and on seeing we can let go. One doesn't become the object of mind. This is not the same as watching materiality. The suffering of rupa cannot be abandoned, one can only lessen it. For example, when one is hungry, one eats to solve the problem, one cannot abandon hunger. The mind is not like this. The things in the mind can be completely abandoned, one can let go once and be rid of things for the rest of one's life, until there is no more birth, old age, sickness, and death. If we put our attention on the right spot, it is not difficult. It is just like a key that fits its lock. One can unlock it right away without wasting time. The principles of the four foundations of awareness can be compared to a key or to a perfect vehicle that one uses for traveling. One passes through continuously. The body, feelings, mind states, and objects of mind are stations that detain us human beings. It is hard to be free from them. But if we develop the foundations of awareness a lot, and put our body, feelings, mind, and mind objects in the boxing ring, awareness will be the champion. It will conquer constantly because the body, feelings, mind, and mind objects are not any self, they will have to confess and surrender to awareness. The truth cannot escape the truth, what is not true cannot withstand verification. The principles of the four foundations of awareness compare with a just judge who upholds uprightness. They charge suffering, the ego, the self, like, dislike, gladness, sadness, defilements, craving, being caught up in things, the sense of me. These things cannot arise. One could say that the foundations of awareness are the contraceptive medicine to control the birth of suffering. Suffering cannot establish itself, because one sees from the beginning that there is only Rupa and Nama. When one sees from the start that there are only just Rupa Dhamma and Nama Dhamma, this immediately affects suffering. It is shaken. This matter is about ending suffering, it is about peace, it is about the remainder-less extinction of all suffering. Luangpor Teean Apagaro. Watsanam Nai, Bongrua District, Nuntaburi Province. The experience of meeting Luangpor Teean. I am a monk from out in the country. My parents were farmers. Before I ordained, I made merit and made offerings. I would go to the monastery as the tradition prescribed, and as my parents used to do. At that time, I didn't practice yet. I ordained when I was nearly 23 years old, in 1961. Having ordained, I studied in an ordinary monastery in Houdan province. I practiced some meditation, but I didn't understand it very well. In 1968, I spent the Rains retreat in Chayapam province, and after that I learned to give Dhamma talks. In those days, in order to give talks, one had to study with a teacher. It so happened that a layman from Lahi province came to visit his relatives here, and he had heard Luangpor Teean speak Dhamma with Ajahn Mahaboa Tong, the latter being one of his first disciples. He practiced with Luangpor Teean, and he was invited to give a talk to the lay people at my wat. This man kept talking to me, telling me all about it, and it struck my mind how he could talk about the Dhamma. I had been a monk for 7 years but still didn't know or understand Dhamma. This made me doubt, and I felt ashamed of myself. I had studied some scriptures, but where was the Dhamma? Ajahn Mahaboa Tong had studied until he had a degree and still practiced too. Where is the Dhamma to be found? If I stayed to be a monk for many years, when I gave a talk there might be meditation monks present, and then I would be embarrassed. So I thought to myself, this year I have to go and practice the Dhamma, I have to go and study the Dhamma with Luangpor Teean to know and understand. As for learning how to give talks, it could wait. At that time, I was imagining that one would probably get psychic powers from practicing meditation, and that one would be able to dive into the earth, become invisible, disappear and those kinds of things, because that is what I had read in books. It is said that one could get the divine eye and ear, and I thought that it really was like that. That would be great. So I decided to find a teacher. I had very high expectations, they pushed me onward. I went to see Luangpor Teean at the Budayan forest in Lahi province. I arrived in the evening and asked to see Luangpor, but he had gone to his home village to open a meditation retreat there. I wanted to go after him. At that time, I had very strong confidence in Luangpor. I wanted to see what Luangpor Teean looked like. However, the monks told me to spend the night there first, and the next day they would take me to him. I agreed. I had a talk with Ajahn Mahaboa Tong but I was still thinking that I wanted to see Luangpor Teean. The next morning we set out to find Luangpor Teean at Bohom village. We arrived around 10 o'clock in the morning. I paid my respects to him, and he asked me, "Where do you come from?" I told him that I ordained at my home village in Houdan Tani province and that I had been studying for 7 years. I told him about my doubts and that I wanted to practice the Dhamma with him. He didn't say much. He asked, "Are you really interested?" I said yes. He asked, "Are you going to practice sincerely?" I said yes. He said, "Practicing Dhamma is easy. There is no need for ceremonies and rituals." I liked that. I had already decided that if he told me to recite rising falling, I wouldn't do it, because I found it was embarrassing. But he was talking about practicing in a simple way, being at ease, using movements. No need to close the eyes while sitting, raising the hand, lowering the hand, making movements. Hey, that sounds simple. He showed me how to do it, and I followed him. When I was able to do it, he let me do it by myself. I felt a bit embarrassed at first. I am someone who easily feels ashamed. He told me to stay alone in a hut. I practiced alone at Bohome village for as long as 15 days, but I still didn't understand. After that, I practiced at the Budayan forest for about a month. Luangpor came to see me every day, 2 or 3 times. He would ask me with a few words about whether I understood or not. I didn't. Later on, one day, after the chanting, I sat chatting with Luangpor and Ajahn Mahaboatong. I told him that I would probably not understand if I practice like this. I had been ordained for 7 years and still didn't know, still didn't understand. Luangpor asked me if I understood Rupanama yet. No. I asked Luangpor if I could practice intensively for a while, which means not to go for the chanting, not to go on alms round and just practice by myself in my hut. Would Luangpor allow me to do that? Luangpor said, nobody has ever done that before. He thought and talked for a while and then agreed. It was decided. As for the food, it was up to Luangpor to tell a layman to bring it over to the hut. I practiced intensively for about a week and I understood, it was just basic understanding. At first I didn't see Rupanama, but later I did, I understood. Altogether, it took me about a month. Now I understood the meaning of ordination, even though I had been a monk for 7 years. I didn't know before, I just studied from books. Before, I just shaved my head and wore the brown robe without understanding anything about the way of life of a monk. Understanding arose as I was doing the rhythmic meditation, raising the hand, I was aware and knowledge arose. I knew without anyone telling me. What I knew, I had never heard and had never read in any book. Knowledge and understanding arose by itself. I saw Rupa and Nama. I saw Rupa Dhamma and Nama Dhamma, I saw Rupa disease and Nama disease, I saw convention. I saw impermanence, instability, and non-selfhood. I saw evil and merit. I saw religion and Buddhism. I saw until the end. I knew all this in an instant. This is the basic stage. I knew this after having practiced intensively for 7 days, but altogether I had been practicing exactly 1 month. I knew Rupanama. I knew many things, it was the knowledge that comes from the defilements due to insight, it is the knowledge of analytical knowledge. Luangpor had a way of teaching, but I didn't know it. Even while doing walking meditation, there were things in my mind. I was thinking about my father. I have been an orphan since I was 5 or 6 years old. My mother looked after me. I thought about my father. He was someone who didn't know anything. He didn't know why he was born, he didn't know and see himself. But I couldn't help him. I could only do something about myself. The next morning, Luangpor told me to stop the intensive practice, he was afraid others would want to follow my example. It would not be fair if he didn't allow others to do it also, if they asked to do so. That's what he said. No one had done this before, one would just practice continuously, working at the same time. There was no intensive practice. He told me to stop, so I stopped. Yet in my mind, I still wanted to continue practicing alone. But out of respect, I stopped. Whatever he said, one had to follow it. When I was first practicing, he didn't let me look at thought, until I had stopped for 4 or 5 days. At that time, I threw myself into it. It was powerful, I was caught up in analytical knowledge and joy. I was bold, I wanted to be alone. I was not afraid to have a Dhamma discussion with anyone, no matter how many degrees he might have. I knew the matter of materiality mentality well. I had never experienced something like this in my life. This is the way it is. The Buddha teaches what it means to be a monk. Even though one has ordained and studied, if one doesn't practice this, if one doesn't know and understand like this, it can be taken that one hasn't ordained as a Buddhist monk. Before, when studying the scriptures, I thought that it was just a matter of the past in India. Luangpor asked me, when it is like this, can you go back home? I said, I can, I'm confident to speak with the teacher. My teacher had been a monk for over 10 years and had studied the Pali language. He was a preceptor and the head monk of the vicinity. He had a lot of theoretical knowledge. Luangpor wanted me to go and teach. I felt that there was something unfinished. At that time, I had only just started. Why did Luangpor say that? I guess he had a reason for it. Luangpor wanted me to talk with my parents and relatives. He wanted me to talk with them about my experience. That's how it was in the old days, but now he has changed to another style. But I'm not like other people, others, Luangpor would urge on. At that time, I had ordained exactly 7 years. Venerable Mahabodh Tong was one of the first disciples. Later Ajahn Kumkian, Ajahn Buntum and Ajahn Somai came. They followed each other closely. After this, Luangpor had me look at thought. When one first sets out to practice and one knows and understands materiality mentality, almost everyone gets caught up in analytical knowledge. Some people experience strong feelings of rapture, others don't. Luangpor didn't let them watch thought. If that was the case, instead he had them do work. Others he just let be. But he said not to be interested in thought, just let it go. The mind was thinking all sorts of good things and ideas, about the future as well as the past, thinking about teaching people, but Luangpor said not to follow it. He said to let the thoughts cool down, let them come to rest. Luangpor taught with a kind of psychology. He had a way to watch people's minds, to watch those who came to practice. He would ask, how are you, is your mind good or not? Is there something in your mind or not? Is your mind in its original state or not? When the mind was in its original state, just like there was nothing there, not knowing or seeing anything at all, he would tell that person to watch thought. The Buddha was enlightened because he worked with the mind. To watch the mind with awareness, one has to look right here. Luangpor advised to look at this place. He said, no thought and let it go. He had us do the rhythmic meditation, to be aware of movements and to watch and see thought. That's about all he said, and then he would vanish. I watched thought for 9 days and I saw objective matter, ultimate meaning, and changing conditions. It was in the evening that I saw it. There was a change in my mind. When I saw Rupanama there was another kind of change, but on seeing ultimate meaning, there was another change. I felt very confident at this point. I realized that I was a noble one. Being a noble one is to be found right here. It is not to do with shaving the head or wearing brown robes. I saw that it was right here. Luangpor taught whoever came to practice to look at the mind, to watch the various thoughts. When there is a change in the mind, everyone should know and see it. This was his method of teaching. He would ask the practitioners what they saw and understood. We would inform him that we knew or understood ultimate meaning or whatever it was. Formerly, I understood that in order to be a monk, a noble one had to shave the head, wear brown robes and stay at a monastery, but now, I understood that anyone can be a noble one, women as well as men. One can wear clothes of whatever color, one can have any nationality, speak whatever language or uphold any religion. This was not yet clear when I knew Rupanama. I understood it but not yet clearly, but on seeing ultimate meaning, awareness was more clear and I saw things that were more refined. I looked at thought until I understood ultimate meaning and various other things. Luangpor advised me to watch thought and to cross over to ultimate meaning. Another change took place. I saw greed, hatred, and delusion, and after that there were more changes. I understood and saw in stages. I understood sickness and death, heaven and hell, evil and merit. But I didn't know in the same way that Luangpor knew. Luangpor knew in stages, but my understanding was different. It wasn't long before the mind changed a third time, and it changed completely. I saw greed, hatred, and delusion at the same time as objective matter, ultimate meaning and changing conditions. After that there were insights continuously. I saw virtue, I saw sensuality, etc., until I knew everything. I understood what the Buddha taught. I practiced alone and didn't talk with anyone. One day, Luangpor gave a talk. He spoke all the way from the beginning of practice. I listened to what he said. I thought, hey, that's exactly what I've experienced and seen. When the talk was over, I went over to talk with him. We just talked very briefly. Since that day, for me, whatever someone may say or teach, I am completely confident that the method that I practiced with Luangpor, the method that Luangpor teaches, is a shortcut, is a straight way of practice, is a method that has nothing to do with ceremonies and rituals. The paths, fruits and nibbana, that we are doubting about, that we're searching for, that we're trying to attain, have nothing to do with studying. One can study or not study. It is another thing altogether. I really am confident about it. Counting from the day that I started to practice by myself, about 1 month and 20 days had passed, from the outer bark to the heartwood. On the last day, I sat doing the rhythmic meditation. I mostly sat, I walked less. It was as if I came to an end, as if I was finished. But awareness was still good, I still felt everything clearly. I was thinking by myself, am I crazy or not? No, I'm not. The eyes still see, the ears still hear, and I still know coming and going. I'm not crazy. Why is it like this? At that time, I didn't know yet. But when I knew, I realized, this is not wrong, this is really what the Buddha teaches. I went to talk with Luangpor and informed him that it was like this. He said, birth has ended, being has ended, the practice has finished. Luangpor used to say that, the Buddha cut his hair only once and that the Buddha kills people, but most of us don't understand these comparisons, we don't know what has been cut. But when I experienced it, I knew that things are like this. When I talked with Luangpor, we didn't talk very long. When I knew, he just let me go. During the last stage that I was watching thought, I looked at my mind changing continuously, in periods, in stages. But there must be an object to know. If one knows without an object to know, if one knows absent-mindedly, it shows that it is not right, it is still wrong. There must be an object constantly, one has to see constantly. I completely understood about the training in virtue, the higher training in virtue, the higher training of the mind and the higher training in wisdom. I knew all of it. But I cannot speak in the same way that Luangpor did. The way he used to talk was that things have to be like this and like that, but what I saw was more like an immediate liberation. Luangpor has another style. It goes in stages. My way is different. Altogether there were 5 shifts in the mind, it happened very quickly. With the last one, I knew the state of arising passing that Luangpor used to talk about. They say, the eye sees a form, it arises and passes. One hears, it arises and passes. Something comes in contact with the body, it arises and passes. This is what's in the scriptures, anyone can say it, but this has nothing to do with the state of arising passing. It is something different. I can really guarantee this method. At this time, with Luangpor having passed away, I can insist that the principles of the method that Luangpor teaches are right. If one really practices, one will get results, regardless of who it is. One can be ordained or not be ordained, it is not connected with having accumulated virtuous qualities in the past. It doesn't depend on anything. This is something different altogether. That's the way it is. Practicing intensively in order to be aware, these are just words. One keeps to oneself, one doesn't talk with anyone, one is alone in one's hut, practicing awareness will become more continuous. This is external practice that people can see, but if the internal awareness is continuous, then, even though one doesn't stay alone, it is also intensive practice. But it is difficult, it is not easy to be constantly aware all the time. But if one can do it, it is intensive practice. Some people can do it without difficulty, wherever one may be. Among 100 people, there may be 1 or 10 who can do it like that. At first, it is quite hard though, one cannot yet catch the awareness, and there are a lot of thoughts. Awareness can't stand up to the thinking, there is only little awareness. But when practicing for a long period of time, the awareness gradually increases. But at first, one sometimes feels disheartened, awareness arises with difficulty. When I first practiced with Luangpor, I sometimes did some walking outside the hut, but, later, when I practiced intensively by myself, I mostly was inside the hut and didn't go outside. I used the posture of sitting more than the posture of walking. One day, as I was sitting, practicing awareness, making movements in the sitting position, for one moment it was just as if things happened very fast, it was as though it happened in a flash, like a flash of lightning. To use Luangpor's expression, it was like a blink of the eye or a snap of the fingers. At that time, it was as if there was something heavy and I threw it off. I felt light. I knew I was light because I had never experienced this before. I felt that something was different. But there was awareness. It didn't go anywhere. I knew that there was lightness. Awareness was stable all the way through, even while being asleep, I knew. When awareness is perfected, dreams during sleep will become less or they might stop altogether. Ordinarily we think a lot, but when we develop awareness, thought becomes less and less. In the scriptures, it is said that noble ones, or those with awareness and wisdom, don't dream. This is talking according to the books. In the daytime we think and at night we dream. One knows one is dreaming, it is similar to thinking. One knows, sees, and understands it, and so one knows at the time that one is dreaming. Developing awareness through making movements with the hands, if we find that it is not convenient to do so, we can be aware of other movements such as blinking the eyes, breathing, or whatever. Awareness can be practiced in many ways, it is universal, it can be applied to our duties and our work. But what is important is to know at that moment, knowing within oneself. We make a movement or we take hold of something. Know what you are doing. There must be one point or other to know. Without having a focus somewhere, we can't catch awareness. The knowing is the most important. If we are aware of some part of the body, we will automatically know other parts that are moving because they are connected. If there is awareness within, one knows while working. It is like turning on the light, suddenly there is brightness. It works at the same time. It connects. Just like a tightrope. When it is cut, everything jerks. We should train our minds to be with awareness and watch our thoughts. Never mind if the mind thinks. It is not that we try to stop thinking. Go ahead and let it think. But look at it. We are just the observer. Observe it continuously and let it go. Trying to train like this, one will make gradual progress, until one reaches that point. All things arise from a cause, things pass because the cause is no longer there. That is what monks teach. But we don't know what the cause is. The monks teach cause condition, object condition, etc. There is a point where causes are finished and conditions are finished. We don't know where they went. No one followed to see what happened. Whether one knows or not, one doesn't see it. We shouldn't call this point the end, because it would be encouraging people to do evil. It would be misunderstood by people who still don't have enough understanding. Therefore, the way of teaching must be a skillful one. Luangpor said, "There is no coming and no going." One can say as much as that. If we were to say that there is no life after death, it would just be the end of the matter, and people wouldn't do anything. They would call it wrong view that one who does good doesn't get rewarded, or doesn't get merit from meritorious actions. There is no heaven and no hell. This is a wrong teaching. There is no coming and no going, reflect on it yourself. It's up to you to figure it out or not. Study it for yourself, know, and see, and be it for yourself. That is better than what someone else might say. When you are and have this knowledge, you will be at ease. Others may want to be reborn. That's their business, but we don't come from or go anywhere. We stay here. In reality, if we understood what the end of life really is, we would be at ease. Everything would be done easily and in comfort. But as it is, we don't understand, so we act out of not understanding, we act in an ignorant way. To act with knowledge is different. There are people who know, but people who don't know still don't know, even when they practice. They are not sure and not confident. But for someone who knows, whatever happens, he or she is sure, whether one practices or not, one is confident. Because one knows. One can practice or not, it really is very simple. The Buddha teaches to practice simply. When we get to that point, we see that the Buddha's teaching is very simple. It is so simple that nothing remains to be said, or there is nothing left to teach. What is there to get? There is nothing to get. Putting it simply, the Buddha teaches to stop, doesn't he? He teaches people to stop. But we don't stop. We're not willing to stop. When we stop, it will be finished, there is nothing. But the body still goes on living, one still eats, one still does various duties and practices, the body still moves. But inside, there is stillness, there is not wanting, there is coolness. It has stopped, it is enough. We could talk in terms of path, fruit, and nibbana, or whatever. There is not birth, there is not death, there is not aging, there is not sickness, there is not going, there is not coming. These words are convention, words spread out and enlarge. So, may all of you be able to train yourselves and prepare yourselves. Try to let appear that which exists already, and when the time comes that the breath stops, it will really be very easy. Ajahn Da Sammakatho. Wat Buddha Yanuntaram Monastery, Las Vegas, 5320 Kell Lane, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89156. Presently living at Redding Meditation Center. www.reddingmeditationsociety.org. The path that is a path. The word path here doesn't mean a path on land, in the water, in the air, or a footpath, but it means a path to be traveled by the mind. From suffering to no suffering. From problems to no problems. From darkness, complexity, and confusion to brightness, peace and coolness. The Buddha is only the one who pointed out the way, Akatha Aro the Takatha. Whether one travels on the path or not, depends entirely on the individual who chooses to travel the path. Whether one acts, speaks, and thinks in a good or bad way, is a personal matter. Whoever practices in accordance with the teachings that the Buddha introduced, will inevitably be someone with brightness, will make progress in life and in work, and will not create problems for society. By contrast, whoever has no interest in the teachings of the Buddha, will experience suffering and will drop into darkness and delusion. Such a person doesn't know the direction that life should take. Such a person is ignorant of what is what, and harms both self and others out of delusion and lack of understanding, through bad behavior in body, speech, and mind. Such a person is under the influence of greed, hatred, and delusion. Described in the biography of the Buddha, as well as before the time of the Buddha, some practiced physical torment of self, and it was widely believed that the 7 or 8 absorptions were the highest of attainments. The Buddha saw that such was not the way to completely escape suffering, it is just a way to temporarily become peaceful or to subdue oneself, like putting a rock on top of the grass. The Buddha rejected those methods, and sought the way out by working with the mind. He continually observed with awareness the conditions that, without pause, arose in the mind, changed and passed away. This caused him to realize the truth, he found the answer to everything, he was the perfect Buddha. He knew right as well as wrong. In sum, the Buddha searched for 6 years to find a way out, through all the various methods that existed in those days, were all just deluded ways, wrong ways, closed ways. They were dead ends, they were paths that are not paths. Awareness to continually watch the movements of body and mind, in accordance with the form of the four foundations of awareness, highlights the importance of the section, in that sutta, which stresses, 1. The postures and, 2. Sampajanya, or awareness directed towards the body. It is the means to access and come into contact with the basic objects of insight meditation, that is to say, to know rupanama, rupa doing, nama doing, rupa disease, nama disease, impermanence, instability, non-selfhood, convention, religion, evil, and merit. This is the initial stage for the practitioner. To know and experience these phenomena is to enter the highway of the Dhamma, and at the same time it is an arrow that points to the final destination, the end of the end, or the end of suffering, which is the highest goal of life. When we have reached it, we will have answers to everything. When knowing and seeing the truth, according to the way things are in reality, the mind begins to change from one thing to another, through the power of ultimate truth. Previous behavior and tendencies get reformed, and, at the same time, that which is really true in life becomes manifest. One loses one's naive beliefs about, for example, ghosts and angels, lucky omens, heaven and hell. One starts a new life, right there, at that point. Just that little bit of awareness is the vehicle that leads life to the end of all suffering. When life reaches the end of the end, it is as if one lives in a new world. It is a world of spiritual freedom, safe from spiritual suffering. It is a safe and peaceful realm. Life has come in touch with the highest truth in Buddhism, will be established in the now, and it will be very simple. It will be light, comfortable, and without worry or doubt. There will be no danger. I can guarantee that one who has come to the stage of ultimate meaning will definitely not lose his or her way. He or she will have nothing to do with ghosts, angels, auspicious timing, sacred things, hell, heaven, death, rebirth, and so forth. This is because one who practices the Dhamma by developing awareness in this fashion, must know and contact objects all the time. That person must review the stages of practice, and investigate what one knows, what one is watching, where and how. All of this one knows instantly. It is said that the truth will not leave someone who is real, and, in the same way, someone who is real will not discard the truth. The secret of changing the states of mind. Take this little feeling, this awareness, as the starting point. Know when a thought pops up in the mind. Just know indifferently, know it, and let it pass. There is not need to pull the mind back, and do not let the thought pull you away. Awareness does its duty of watching by itself. When awareness keeps a close and careful watch, the observer and the observed are separated things, and one doesn't get entangled in thought. There will only be pure awareness in the present. At the moment that there is not greed, hatred, or delusion mixed up with the feeling, one will automatically know from deep within the mind that, a change in the mind has clearly taken place. And in the end, that small awareness will have become, a hidden power, in each and every posture. We know Luangpor Teean from meeting and talking with him, from reading his books, from what others have said about him and from practicing. But I know him as the one who gave me a new life. The principles for conducting one's life in a simple, light, and comfortable way, without worry, were passed on to me from experience gained, when I was close to Luangpor, continuously and for a long period of time. I have spent 6 rains retreats with him. I used to think, in those days, that I would stick with him forever. To get a new life is like reliving life anew, or one could say that it is dying and being born again. Dying before death, being born again, my being born in the Dhamma, approaches now its 15th year. At present, life is in its teenage stage in the Dhamma. I'm not much attached to places or people. I feel that my experiences of life are very little. It's not yet enough, but as far as practice goes, it is sufficient. I know what to do, and I don't suffer. Let me go back a bit. Formerly, when I went to see Luangpor Teean, I thought I would dedicate myself to him, whatever he would advise I would determine to do, as a lesson or an experiment. I determined this because, I had strong determination and an aspiration to prove myself according to his principles, and I was confident that this way that I had chosen was the last way out. With such determination, opposing views, opinions, and thoughts were erased altogether. I had no doubts, I had no problem at all. When I started to practice with determination, fully and continuously, by being aware of standing, sitting, walking, lying down, bending, stretching, moving, blinking, breathing, swallowing saliva, leaning to the right and the left, raising and lowering the head, eating, drinking, going to the toilet, dressing, and so forth for 3 days, I was aware and completely awake. Awareness was purely in the present, there was no past or future. Materiality and mentality appeared clearly and cut off doubt. I saw Rupa as Rupa, and Nama as Nama. On seeing it, doubts disappeared. I won't talk about my personal knowledge, but I'll say something directly about the principles, that are the technique of practice. To practice intensively, alone in one's room, is a wonderful opportunity for someone who is seeking a way out for oneself, and it presents an opportunity, for those who are keen on this way of practice, for those who are real, and for those who are genuinely determined, and who practice sincerely, to really prove this style of practice. One can choose this solitary practice for either 7 days, 15 days, 3 months, 1 year, or 3 years. Those who volunteer to practice can choose according to what is suitable for oneself. One should stay alone and keep silent in one's hut or whatever place it may be. A monk or teacher would advise one in developing awareness and could be consulted. He or she is a friend to help the practitioner to really go for it, without having to do anything else. Just to work with the mind, to observe oneself, to be with oneself. To be determined to just watch over the movements of body and mind, all the time. Not to read books, not to receive or write letters, to be cut off from the external world temporarily, just for the time that one is practicing intensively. Every day, someone would bring food over once or twice a day, depending on what one agrees on with the teacher. The teacher, who is like a good friend, would pay close attention to the practitioner, and advise or warn him or her when necessary. Things can be discussed with the teacher, and problems or obstacles can be overcome that way. When one practices, results will appear by themselves. Luangpor Teean Atha Banyo. Wat Hapasantha Equanaram, Hapakshom District, Lahi Province. I was born around 1905 in Hapakshom village, Lahi Province. My father's name was Junwan Putongsi and my mother's name was Gi. I had 5 brothers and sisters, I was the oldest. I ordained when I was over 20. At that time, Luangpor Teean was still a novice, and he came to study with me. I was a monk for 2 years, and then disrobed. After that, I had a family. My wife's name was Kumpi. I had 4 sons and 1 daughter. When I was about 50 years old, I heard that the layman Pun in Tapua, Luangpor Teean, had opened a meditation retreat at Bohome village. At that time, I was a layman. I was interested, so I went to practice with him. It took me about 8 days to understand Rupanama. I saw materiality, I saw mentality. Then I saw impermanence, instability, and non-selfhood. I saw things arising and passing away. Then I saw thought. I saw the origin of suffering. After that, in 1961, I ordained, again, and continued to practice. Luangpor showed me the way, and I saw ultimate meaning. When the stage of ultimate meaning was concluded, I was instructed to look at virtue and the aggregates of virtue, of concentration, and of wisdom. I carried that out until I saw all 3 of them. Virtue here is the virtue of path, fruit, and nibbana, it is not conventional virtue. The 5, 8, 10, or 227 precepts are conventional virtues of the world. Having seen virtue, concentration, and wisdom, I next saw the defilements and cankers. They were cut away, Just like that. I cast away the cankers of sensuality, of being, and of ignorance. I was completely free from them. I broke away from ignorance and reached the end of suffering after having practiced for about 10 years. At that time, I felt that Luangpor Teean was my teacher, was my father, was the one who gave me life in the Dhamma, and I was confident that what I had discovered was the Dhamma that the Buddha was enlightened to. The Dhamma that the Buddha was enlightened to is suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. It was like this for sure. It is complete. One sees suffering, sees the cause of suffering, sees the extinguishing of suffering, and sees the path that leads to the end of suffering. It is this way. This is the middle way that the Buddha talked about. We must do it like this. There isn't much to practicing, there is the rhythmic meditation, and there are the 4 foundations of awareness, looking at the body, feelings, mind states and mental objects. Watch the movements of the body, see the body in the body, watch feeling, see the feelings in the feelings, watch the mind, see the mind states in the mind states, to watch mental objects, see the mental objects in the mental objects. These 4 things, practice them well. When one is determined and has established these 4 foundations, one can have realizations. Practice continuously, all the time. Awareness arises whenever one is ready, it is to be seen here and now. The practitioner should see for him or herself. It is not thinking, guessing, or expecting, one knows by oneself. One knows with this kind of knowledge, it exists already. One knows as the Buddha knows, knowing like this, seeing this, understanding this. Confidence must be the plant of practice, effort is the rein, a sense of shame to do evil is the yoke and plow handle, the mind is the rope, awareness is the plowshare and goad, and the person who plows is the field. Confidence means to believe, effort means to strive, patience means endurance. But we don't endure. When there is a reason, anger arises, one cannot pull it out. One must really practice in order to know the truth. It is not a joke, it is real. One has to investigate it. It is something that one should encourage others to practice, it can be passed on to others. The truth is like this. Whoever has confidence will see this, and whoever doesn't have confidence won't see it. Anyone can do it, men as well as women. Luangpor used to say, brothers and sisters can all do it. If we train every single day, it's like taming a tiger in the forest. The real Dhamma is within us, one cannot find it outside oneself, it really isn't there. But when we look for it in ourselves, it really is there. Don't be lazy, abandon laziness. Abandon it, it can be abandoned. Don't be heedless, heedlessness is the source of death. One must use patience, endure things, make effort in practice and practice continuously. When sitting, don't stop, watch. When lying down, watch. Watch while standing and walking, watch continuously. If we see, it means that we are in time. If we don't see, it means that we're not in time. Be in time. Keep up with thought. Thoughts lead us to suffering, lead us to laziness. We all have suffering because of thought. Solve the problem with this knowledge. When thoughts come up, don't follow them. Let them go, but we don't go with them. Watch and let the knowing come back, establish awareness and know, don't get deluded by thoughts. Once one is deluded, one will be caught up continuously, one will think and think again, many things. This is suffering, when there is thought, there is suffering. When one can stop thought, there is happiness. That's the way it is. These are the principles of practice. Luangpor Buntum, Hutta Ma Damo. Wat Pon Tong, Gaang Kro District, Chayapum Province. At the end of 1966, I went up to practice with Luangpor Teean at the original Budayan forest, it is now a teacher's college. I went up there because Ajahn Mahabodh Tong invited me. He told me that he had met an old monk who taught Dhamma at the Budayan forest. He had good aspirations and firm conduct, he taught directly and was aiming in particular for the destruction of defilements. There was no inclination to psychic powers, and he didn't practice for gain. He didn't seem to be a foolish old monk, he would certainly not lead one onto the wrong path. When I had heard about this, I became interested. I changed my mind about going to the south. After the Rains retreat of 1966, I decided to go to Lae province, and visited Ajahn Mahaboatong. When I arrived that day, Ajahn Mahaboatong was doing intensive practice at another village. When he heard that I had arrived, he presented me with a book to give me some courage. As for me, I paid my respects to Luangpor Teean and told him of my intentions. He immediately introduced me to the rhythmic meditation. When I started to practice, my ideas of going to the south disappeared, and I determined to really practice. I practiced from the end of October until March 1967, before I understood Rupanama. Then I went back home to tell the people there about it. When I went back to Lae, I had invited 3 monks to come along. With the arrival of the rainy season, Luangpor Teean, who was still a layman at that time, came up to practice also, which made me feel very happy. I was impressed with the way of practice of Luangpor because it was a natural way of practice. It was simple, convenient, and relaxed. Luangpor was also very much at ease. He was a good example, he would lead us to live and eat simply. He was not conceited. Even though he was a monk who ordained later in life, from out in the country, who couldn't read or write, he would not be inactive. He still trained himself incessantly, he was diligent in asking me to help him to learn how to read. He studied with me to read and write. That year, B began to be able to read. He was an excellent example to his disciples in doing walking meditation. When he took a rest from that, he would get out the table and train himself to write. There were these special qualities in this aged monk. We kind of felt ashamed. It was hard for us to equal him in the way he ate and slept. He was not embarrassed in any society, rather, whatever he expressed was a fine model for that company. I was increasingly impressed. The reason that I left Luangpor and went to stay somewhere else, was not because I was fed up with the teachings, but I was fed up with teaching. In the year 1968, there were a lot of monks and novices, Thai novices as well as Laotian ones. Luangpor had Ajahn Mahaboatong and myself teach them the theories of Buddhism. And so the time to practice diminished. I didn't like to teach. When the Rains retreat came, Ajahn Mahaboatong left to spend the Rains retreat on the banks of a river in another district. I was teaching by myself, no one helped me. As for Luangpor Teean, he left to do intensive practice at Bohom village. I thought hard, I reviewed again and again. I thought about Potila, a teacher in the time of the Buddha who had 500 disciples every year. The Buddha was not satisfied with this, he didn't take delight in Potila being such a big teacher. The Buddha called Potila, an empty person even in the midst of people. This was to make Potila realize that he was not superior, and to let him get fed up with just teaching. When Potila was more and more driven in a corner, he finally went to find a good place to practice. I thought the same way. That year, when I had finished teaching the monks and novices, Ajahn Mahaboatong came down to participate in the examinations. In the year 1969, Ajahn Mahaboatong, Ajahn Tongin, Ajahn King, and I, altogether the 4 of us, set out to travel to the mountains of Chayapum. When we arrived, we stayed under our umbrella-like tents. After some days, we moved to a place that is now a well-known monastery. The land was offered in that year by several lay people. The other 3 monks left to spend the Rains retreat and then left again. In 1975, Luangpor Teean came up to stay with me until 1979. That year, I returned to my home village and stayed there until the present.
May all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be at ease.